In the beginning, before any creature had eyes to see or ears to hear, before the concept of a mind had even flickered into existence, life on Earth was a quiet and unremarkable struggle. The oceans were dark, warm, and indifferent. Molecules bumped into each other blindly, forming simple cells that reacted only when pushed. There was no sensation, no experience, no awareness. The planet was alive, but the living world felt nothing. And yet, hidden within this emptiness, the story of perception was already waiting to unfold. The universe, vast and cold, had no natural obligation to be beautiful or meaningful. But through a chain of improbable steps and evolutionary experiments, life would eventually evolve a machine that could carve meaning out of chaos, the brain. A silent architect that would create a world within a world, shaping how organisms understood danger, opportunity, and eventually, themselves. To understand how evolution built the human mind, we must step back billions of years into a time when the first whispers of sensation appeared. Early life existed like drifting shadows. A cell had no idea where it was or what surrounded it. It simply reacted to chemicals that touched its surface. If something harmful approached, the cell recoiled. If something nutritious floated by, it absorbed it. Everything was automatic, a choreography dictated by genes, not awareness. The universe was happening to life, but life was not experiencing the universe. Yet evolution is patient. It works through tiny advantages, a slightly faster reaction, a slightly better response. At some point, a simple mutation allowed primitive organisms to react differently depending on where a stimulus came from. Suddenly, direction mattered. That tiny difference in behavior, turning away from danger instead of just shrinking, became the seed of what would one day blossom into full perception. The ocean, once an endless uniform world, now contained gradients of meaning. Light meant warmth, warmth meant food, and shadows meant danger. These tiny clues, once irrelevant, became valuable. Evolution seized the opportunity. If life could detect patterns in the environment, it could make better choices. And so, the earliest nervous systems began to appear, not brains, but delicate networks of connected cells able to coordinate reactions faster than chemistry alone. They did not see, hear, or think. But they sensed. And sensing was the first step toward knowing. Imagine a small worm-like creature drifting through the ancient seas. It had no face, no identity, no concept of self. But for the first time in Earth's history, it could detect changes in its surroundings and respond in a way that helped it survive. It could follow faint gradients of light or avoid sudden pressure changes that signaled predators. This primitive awareness wasn't perception as we experience it today, but it was the earliest architectural framework upon which perception would evolve. From the outside, nothing seemed remarkable. But inside, something revolutionary was happening. The world was no longer a flat, meaningless background. A newborn form of reality was emerging, one created inside the organism, shaped by the signals it received. This, in its simplest form, was the earliest version of a brain dreaming a tiny sliver of the universe. The brain didn't evolve to understand truth. It evolved to help organisms survive. And survival demanded filters, shortcuts, illusions, ways of reducing the overwhelming complexity of the world into something usable. The brain became the master of this reduction. It became a storyteller, taking fragments of light, vibrations, chemicals, and pressure, and weaving them into a coherent picture of reality. But in these ancient times, reality was still a faint whisper. It would take millions of years for perception to become rich enough to resemble the world we know. Each evolutionary leap added new layers, better pattern detection, more refined responses, stronger predictions about what might happen next. The ocean became a training ground, and life became increasingly specialized in reading the signals hidden within it. Even then, the brain remained quiet, unseen. It did not announce itself. It simply worked, refining its craft with each generation. Every new adaptation was a step toward complexity, toward awareness, toward the illusion of a stable, meaningful world. Evolution never planned any of this. There was no goal, no direction. But the random mutations that improved survival were preserved, and perception slowly took shape. We tend to think of reality as something out there, something external and fixed. But long before humans ever existed, the architecture of perception was being built brick by evolutionary brick. Life was constructing an inner universe, an internal simulation that would later become rich enough to support thoughts, emotions, dreams, and imagination. The earliest organisms could not have known the significance of what they were beginning. But from their simple signaling networks would emerge the advanced brains of fish, amphibians, reptiles, mammals, and eventually, humans. Each evolutionary chapter added more depth to the illusion the brain created. Colors became vivid. Sounds gained nuance. Memory appeared, and with memory came the ability to predict. The universe inside the skull grew more elaborate, more detailed, more immersive. And the most astonishing part is that all of this began with simplicity, tiny cells responding to tiny changes in a vast ocean. A process that started without purpose eventually created creatures capable of contemplating purpose. What began as basic survival responses eventually produced beings who could ponder the nature of perception itself. Standing here today, holding a human brain in our imagination, we see a structure that is both ancient and astonishingly new. It carries the imprint of every evolutionary milestone. Hidden within its folds is the entire story of life learning to experience the world. It is a storyteller shaped by billions of years, dreaming a reality that feels absolute, even though it is deeply subjective. Section 1 closes with a reflective transition. The brain may be the silent architect, but its creation, our perception, has been sculpted through time, pressure, danger, and opportunity. To understand who we are, we must follow this evolutionary trail even deeper, back to the very first sparks of sensation and the long journey toward consciousness. Before perception existed, life moved through the world like a drifting shadow, alive, yet completely untouched by experience. There were no colors, no shapes, no sounds, no feelings. Organisms floated through the oceans unaware of themselves and unaware of the universe that wrapped around them. They reacted, but they did not know they were reacting. They survived, but they did not feel alive. This was a world ruled by chemistry alone, where existence was mechanical, automatic, and utterly silent. It is difficult for the human mind to imagine such a reality. Our entire experience of life is filtered through sensation. We see the world, hear it, taste it, touch it, fear it, love it. But for the earliest life forms, there was only a continuous unfolding of chemical reactions guided by simple genetic instructions. A single-celled organism drifting in the Precambrian ocean had no concept of danger, no desire for safety. It simply moved when pushed and absorbed nutrients when they floated close enough. If the environment changed, the organism's internal chemistry changed with it, without awareness, without interpretation. Yet even in this numb and senseless world, the seeds of perception were quietly forming. Evolution does not leap, it accumulates. One tiny advantage, repeated over millions of years, becomes a transformation. Somewhere in those early oceans, among the first colonies of cells and primitive organisms, small changes began to take shape. Some cells responded slightly faster to certain chemicals. Some could detect faint differences in temperature. Others could react more strongly to changes in pressure. These were not senses, not yet. They were simply chemical triggers, but they offered survival benefits. Imagine a microscopic organism that reacted to a toxin in the water by contracting inward. It didn't feel danger, but the contraction prevented damage. Over generations, organisms that reacted more quickly survived longer and reproduced more successfully. Slowly, these basic reactions became more complex. Clusters of cells started working together, coordinating their responses. Instead of a single chemical reaction, there was now a small chain of reactions, a primitive hint of organization. In time, these reactions formed the basis of something revolutionary, the ability to differentiate between states of the environment. Was it hotter or colder? Was there more light or less? Was the chemical gradient stronger or weaker? These distinctions were not experienced as perceptions, they were simply differences in survival conditions. But the moment life began to detect differences, the door to perception opened. For billions of years, Earth remained a planet filled with organisms that lived without experiencing anything. But the pressures of survival were relentless. Organisms that could respond more effectively to environmental changes had a clear advantage. Those that could sense chemical gradients could move toward nutrients instead of waiting for nutrients to come to them. Those that could detect pressure changes could avoid being swallowed. Each small improvement nudged life closer to the emergence of a true sensory world. Still, there was no inner reality yet, no images, no sounds, no mental landscapes. The universe existed only physically, not experientially. To these early organisms, the ocean did not feel vast. Darkness did not feel like darkness. Light did not appear as brightness. Everything simply happened. Life flowed forward without question, without curiosity, without the ability to wonder. The absence of perception did not mean the absence of complexity, however. Simple organisms often behaved in surprisingly intricate ways, guided entirely by biochemical pathways. But without awareness, these behaviors were mechanical, predictable, and entirely dependent on environmental triggers. Life was reacting, not interpreting, not anticipating. This era in Earth's history was both incredibly stable and incredibly limited. Without perception, organisms could not form memories or learn. They could not adapt to new conditions within a single lifetime. Every adaptation had to happen genetically, passed down through countless generations. The world was experienced only through DNA, not through minds. And yet, within this world of unthinking reactions, life was exploring every possible evolutionary niche. Some organisms built protective shells. Others developed the ability to photosynthesize. Some clumped together into colonies, gaining strength in unity. Each innovation pushed life toward greater complexity, and complexity, eventually, required coordination. Coordination required communication. Communication required signals. Signals required sensitivity. And sensitivity, given enough time, would become sensation. The leap from reaction to sensation was not dramatic, it didn't happen in a single moment. But as organisms evolved networks of cells that could transmit information, they crossed an invisible threshold. These networks became the ancestors of nerve cells. The ancestors of neural pathways. The ancestors of minds. Life was beginning to build the infrastructure needed for perception, even if perception itself had not yet appeared. When we look back at this ancient era, it seems almost alien. A planet full of life that cannot feel alive. A world where everything happens physically, but nothing is experienced internally. And yet, this stage was essential. Before perception could evolve, life needed structure. It needed stability. It needed the machinery of communication and response. Evolution was setting the stage for something extraordinary, the birth of a subjective world. Soon, organisms would not only respond to their environments, they would begin to experience them. They would sense patterns, detect predators, seek food, and eventually, form the earliest sparks of awareness. But before all of that, there was only this, a world without perception, a world where life existed in darkness, waiting for the first glow of sensation to ignite. Long before complex brains emerged, long before animals could see or hear or dream, evolution produced something astonishing, the first true neural cells. They were not minds, in any human sense, but they were the ancestors of everything a mind would one day become. These primitive nerve cells allowed organisms to do something revolutionary, they could transmit information from one part of the body to another at astonishing speed. For the first time in Earth's history, life could coordinate itself in real time. Imagine the ancient oceans filled with simple creatures, jellyfish-like beings drifting in the currents, soft-bodied organisms clinging to the ocean floor, worm-like animals moving slowly through the mud. None of them had a brain, but some had developed thread-like cells capable of passing electrical signals. These cells formed networks, loose webs of communication stretching through their bodies. This was the earliest form of a nervous system, a tool that allowed life to react faster than chemistry alone. In these organisms, sensation was still primitive. They could not form images or sounds or memories. But they could detect touch, pressure, slight changes in the environment, and respond instantly. A cnidarian, for example, could contract its entire body when touched. It could pulse its way through the water, not because it understood movement, but because the neural net allowed coordination. These networks were the very first spark of what would eventually become perception. This was the turning point where life began shifting from merely reacting to actively processing information. A nerve cell firing was not awareness, but it was a code, an electrical pattern that meant something for survival. These patterns grew more refined as evolution repeated the same experiment across countless generations. Each improvement sharpened the organism's ability to sense and respond. Consider what this meant at the time. The oceans were full of predators and prey, and survival often depended on milliseconds. An organism that could sense a disturbance and contract faster had an enormous advantage. It didn't have to know why it was contracting. Natural selection favored speed, not understanding. And so, the neural nets grew more efficient. Slowly, patterns emerged. Some neural networks began clustering, forming thicker regions where more processing could occur. Others spread out, branching like tiny living circuits. These early systems were still nothing like brains, but they hinted at a new evolutionary path, the centralization of control. The idea that sensing and responding could be managed from a core structure was beginning to form, even if no creature had taken that step yet. In this world, the first spark of a mind was not a thought. It was not a feeling. It was a signal, an electrical pulse racing through a strand of nerve tissue. But this signal changed everything. For the first time, life was no longer a passive participant in its environment. It could anticipate patterns in a rudimentary way. It could respond with improved timing. It could coordinate its movement in ways that gave it a strategic edge. This was the first moment when life began to shape its own fate. These simple neural networks also introduced something profound: internal states. Even if extremely primitive, these organisms carried internal electrical patterns that represented the outside world. A change in pressure might trigger one pathway, while a change in light might trigger another. This was the earliest form of data processing. The organism wasn't just reacting, it was selecting responses based on differentiated inputs. In evolutionary terms, this was monumental. Once life began processing information, even at the simplest level, the door opened for more sophisticated systems. Over millions of years, those electrical pathways became more specialized. Some cells handled input. Others managed output. Some became connectors, allowing more complex information flow. This specialization eventually led to the formation of nerve cords, ganglia, and clustered control centers, precursors to true brains. But in this early era, the organisms themselves remained humble. A jellyfish pulsed through the sea guided by decentralized networks. Worm-like animals moved through sediment using simple rhythm-generating circuits. Life was learning to coordinate. To integrate. To interpret just enough of the world to gain advantage. The beauty of evolution is that complexity arises from simple rules repeated over unimaginable time. A small improvement in reaction time led to better survival. Better survival led to more specialized neural pathways. Specialized pathways led to early organization. Organization led to the first centralized bundles of nerve cells. Soon, life would begin to experiment with even more advanced structures, clusters of neurons that could store information, form basic memory, and eventually create subjective experience. But in this ancient world, the spark had only just ignited. The ocean was still a dark, silent realm of instinctual responses. These organisms had no sense of self, no awareness of their surroundings in any conscious way. Yet within them, the architecture of future minds was quietly taking shape. Every electrical pulse in these primitive networks was a tiny rehearsal for something greater. Each signal was a stepping stone toward the moment when perception would appear, when organisms would begin to feel the world instead of simply reacting to it. The first neural systems were fragile, simple, and limited, but they were enough. Enough to start the cascade that would eventually lead to emotion, imagination, identity, dreams, and the complex reality your own brain constructs every moment. Long before animals gazed at landscapes or saw the faces of their own kind, vision began as something far simpler, a way to detect the presence or absence of light. In the ancient oceans, where most of life still drifted or crawled in relative darkness, this basic ability marked a dramatic shift. Light was one of the most reliable environmental signals on Earth, carrying information about danger, opportunity, depth, and time. Any organism that could distinguish light from shadow had an immediate survival advantage. And so, evolution began shaping one of the most powerful senses the world would ever know. Imagine those early seas, dim, murky, filled with drifting particles that scattered sunlight into ghostly beams. Most organisms were effectively blind, navigating only through touch and chemical gradients. But in some microscopic creatures, clusters of light-sensitive proteins, opsins, started to arrange themselves into specialized cells. When struck by photons, these cells triggered electrical signals that rippled through the organism's primitive nervous system. There was no image, no shape, no awareness. But for the first time, life could register the difference between brightness and darkness. This change was small, almost trivial. But evolution thrives on tiny advantages. A creature that could sense shadows could detect when a predator approached from above. A creature that sensed rising light could move toward the surface where more nutrients floated. Gradually, these light-sensitive patches grew more refined. They curved slightly, allowing organisms to detect the direction of incoming light. This helped them orient themselves, swimming toward food-rich zones or away from harmful ultraviolet radiation. Still, vision had not yet become vision. It was a directional light compass, not a window into the world. Over millions of years, a remarkable transformation occurred. Some organisms developed pits, small indentations that shielded the opsin cells on one side. This simple change allowed for crude directional, shadow mapping, giving the creature a sense of where danger or opportunity might lie. In time, these pits deepened. Their openings narrowed. And the shape began to resemble a pinhole chamber. This is where evolution made its first astonishing leap. With a pinhole structure, the creature could detect not only the presence of light but faint differences in light patterns. Shapes began to emerge, not clear, not detailed, but enough to differentiate between a looming predator and drifting debris. The world was still blurry, still dreamlike, but it was no longer a featureless glow. The organism could now respond not just to shadow, but to form. Meanwhile, predators were evolving too. Those that could sense their surroundings more effectively had enormous advantages in hunting. As prey animals became more sensitive to visual cues, predators had to become better at tracking movement. This created an evolutionary arms race, pushing visual systems to become more complex on both sides. Eventually, some lineages developed curved patches of tissue over their light-sensitive pits. This allowed the focusing of light, sharpening the blurry images. Primitive lenses began forming, at first just transparent layers of skin, then more specialized spherical lenses that could bend light in controlled ways. With each improvement, the underwater world gained more depth, contrast, and detail. For the first time, the ocean was no longer a dark, ambiguous space. It had structure. It had direction. It had character. Imagine a trilobite scuttling along the seafloor, using its newly evolved compound eyes to detect the motion of predators or competitors. Its vision was faceted, mosaic-like, able to track movement with astonishing precision. In other lineages, simple camera-like eyes emerged, eyes that could form continuous images and detect subtle changes in light. The clarity of these early images would seem crude by human standards, but for their time, they were miraculous. Vision transformed everything. Creatures no longer moved aimlessly, they navigated pathways, recognized patterns, and reacted to distant threats long before they reached them. Suddenly, the world was not just a series of random encounters. It became a landscape of choices. The evolution of vision also reshaped ecosystems. Predators could hunt more effectively in open water. Prey developed new strategies: camouflage, rapid escapes, hiding in complex terrain. Coral reefs, shallow seas, and coastal ecosystems became arenas of color, motion, and complexity driven by the rising power of sight. But there is a deeper truth beneath this story: vision is not passive. The earliest eyes did not reveal the ocean as it truly was. They revealed the ocean only as evolution allowed their owners to see it. Even in these early stages, perception was selective. Vision filtered reality. Light patterns that were irrelevant to survival simply didn't matter. The ocean was full of signals, but the early visual system captured only a narrow sliver of them. This is still true today. The animals of the ancient oceans were not discovering the world, they were constructing a version of it inside their nervous systems. Their eyes collected light, but their neural networks interpreted patterns, creating a subjective representation of the environment. The ocean they perceived was an evolutionary illusion shaped by survival pressures. As the section ends, the oceans remain dark, but no longer unknowable. The first eyes have opened, revealing a shimmering, shifting world filled with meaning. Vision has emerged as one of the most transformative forces in evolution. The next steps will take this sense further still, turning simple light detection into vivid color perception, an ability that would change not just survival, but the very experience of existence. Before color existed as a subjective experience, the world was a place of brightness and shadow, of subtle gradients and shifting contrasts. Early vision helped creatures detect shapes, movement, and light, but it could not yet reveal the rich tapestry of hues we take for granted. In those ancient oceans, everything was seen in a primitive grayscale. And yet, beneath that muted reality, evolution was preparing one of its most astonishing gifts: the ability to perceive color, an invention not of the universe, but of the brain. Color perception began with a simple mutation. Some organisms developed photoreceptor cells that responded not just to light intensity, but to different wavelengths of light. At first, this ability was faint and unreliable. But it offered a subtle advantage. Detecting variations in wavelength allowed creatures to better distinguish between types of light, which often signaled different depths, different dangers, and different opportunities. In shallow seas, where sunlight filtered through layers of water, recognizing wavelength shifts could help organisms identify regions rich in nutrients or safer from predators. Over time, these small advantages accumulated. Some organisms evolved multiple types of photoreceptors, each tuned to a different wavelength. These early photoreceptors did not yet produce color as we know it. Instead, they provided comparative data. One receptor fired more under certain lighting conditions, another under slightly different ones. The brain, or its ancient precursors, interpreted the patterns to make more refined decisions. Slowly, the grayscale world began to split into distinctions of wavelength. Not colors, but differences that mattered deeply for survival. Imagine a shallow prehistoric reef bathed in the fractured sunlight of a young Earth. Predators lurked in the darker regions while nutrient-rich algae glowed subtly brighter. Organisms that could detect these differences lived longer, feeding more effectively and avoiding danger more successfully. Evolution favored these abilities. Photoreceptors became more specialized. Neural circuits became more capable of comparing signals. The foundations of color vision grew stronger. Then, something extraordinary happened. As organisms evolved more refined visual systems, the comparisons between wavelengths produced new internal experiences. The brain, interpreting the data to help with survival, created sensations, subjective realities that did not exist outside the organism. Red, blue, green, these were not properties of the external world. They were inventions, constructed interpretations that helped the organism navigate more effectively. Color was not discovered in nature. Color was created inside the mind. Different lineages evolved different forms of color perception. Insects developed compound eyes that could detect ultraviolet patterns invisible to early vertebrates. Fish gained the ability to see a wide spectrum of hues, allowing them to communicate through vibrant displays. Coral reef species exploded into brilliance, not for our eyes, but for one another's. Bright colors became signals, warnings, invitations, disguises. Color changed the rules of survival. A predator could hide behind a rock the exact shade of the seafloor. A prey animal could flash sudden bright colors to confuse attackers. Some species evolved colors that blended perfectly into complex reef patterns, disappearing in plain sight. Others used color to communicate readiness to mate or to warn rivals to stay away. The underwater world transformed into an arena of vivid strategies. But it is crucial to understand that these colors were not out there in any objective sense. They were perceptual worlds crafted individually by each species' nervous system. A shrimp saw a different world than a fish. A fish saw a different world than an early amphibian. The ocean was not one world, but millions of overlapping perceptual realities, each shaped by evolutionary demands. As vertebrates transitioned onto land, color vision took on new dimensions. The terrestrial world was filled with flowers, leaves, changing seasons, and rich gradients of light. Here, color became an even more powerful tool. Plants evolved bright hues to attract early pollinators. Animals developed more vibrant displays to attract mates and intimidate competitors. The world blossomed with color, not because color existed fundamentally, but because life had found a way to use wavelength information for survival. In early mammals, color vision dimmed. Many became nocturnal, relying on smell and hearing instead of sight. But primates, returning to daylight millions of years later, rediscovered the evolutionary advantage of distinguishing colors. Their photoreceptors diversified once again, allowing them to see ripe fruits among dense foliage. And with this return to daylight came a new richness in perceptual experience. Humans inherited this visual legacy. The colors we see, every sunset, every forest canopy, every shimmering river, are the result of ancient evolutionary pathways that turned wavelength detection into emotional, meaningful experience. Color is a story our brains tell us about the world, not a property of light itself. When the world became color, perception became something deeper than survival. It became a bridge between the raw physical world and the internal world of feeling. Colors evoke emotions, warmth, danger, comfort, energy. They guide our attention, shape our memories, and influence our decisions. All of this is rooted in those first simple mutations that allowed life to sense wavelength differences. The ancient oceans were the birthplace of color, uninspired, functional, necessary. Over millions of years, the ability to see wavelengths evolved into the vibrant spectrum we perceive today. Color became one of the most emotionally powerful tools of the mind, shaping not just how we survive, but how we interpret beauty, meaning, and reality itself. Long before human beings pondered the nature of consciousness, long before complex animals developed thoughts, fears, or memories, the earliest nervous systems were already doing something profound: they were predicting. This may sound advanced for such primitive creatures, but prediction began as a simple evolutionary necessity. Life needed to anticipate danger, opportunity, and change, because reacting only after something happened was often too late. Even the earliest neural networks were shaped not just to sense the world, but to guess what might come next. In the ancient oceans, a slight delay could mean the difference between survival and extinction. A creature that could detect the faintest ripple and prepare to contract had a better chance of escaping a predator. Organisms began developing internal models, simple ones at first, linking certain signals with expected outcomes. A sudden drop in light meant a shadow overhead. A specific chemical meant a predator was near. These were not conscious associations. They were biological predictions, built through countless generations of trial and error. Over millions of years, neural circuits grew more complex. Organisms no longer responded merely to stimuli, they responded to patterns. And as soon as the brain began recognizing patterns, it inevitably began anticipating them. The world became a place of expectations rather than endless surprises. This shift marked one of the most important transitions in the history of perception. Imagine a small fish navigating the shallow waters of an ancient reef. It doesn't simply react to the flicker of movement. Its brain automatically predicts the path of a predator, estimating where danger might strike. If a shadow passes overhead, the fish does not wait for the predator to descend. It darts away instantly. The brain is not seeing reality, it is forming a best guess based on incomplete information. And that guess keeps the fish alive. This predictive ability improved as neural structures became more specialized. New clusters of neurons evolved to compare past inputs with present ones. Primitive memory traces emerged, allowing organisms to refine their predictions over time. A creature that learned from earlier encounters could anticipate new ones more effectively. Slowly, prediction became the central organizing principle of brain function. This idea, the brain as a prediction machine, is not a modern philosophical concept. It is an ancient evolutionary strategy encoded in the very architecture of neural systems. Sensory organs do not passively deliver the world as it is. Instead, the brain constantly creates expectations and adjusts them based on incoming signals. In other words, perception became a negotiation between what is happening outside and what the brain thinks is happening inside. Even the earliest vertebrates relied heavily on prediction. Their nervous systems evolved fast processing circuits that could anticipate motion, detect trajectories, and prepare muscular responses before threats fully unfolded. The brain learned to filter the flood of sensory signals, prioritizing what was most relevant for survival. Irrelevant information was ignored, blurred, or suppressed. Evolution had no interest in giving organisms a perfect view of reality, only a useful one. As animals became faster and more agile, prediction became even more crucial. Neural circuits needed to anticipate the future position of prey, the angle of escape routes, the timing of movement sequences. The creatures that could predict movement with greater precision became apex predators or highly elusive prey. This arms race pushed neural processing toward greater sophistication. Eventually, prediction began to influence not just movement, but perception itself. When the brain expected to see something, it pre-filled missing details. When it expected a sound, it amplified or suppressed the signal accordingly. Over millions of years, the brain developed the habit of hallucinating the world in advance, using sensory input not to build reality from scratch, but to correct the predictions already running inside. This is why even today, human perception works the same way. Our brains constantly predict the world a fraction of a second before we experience it. The colors we see, the shapes we perceive, the continuity of motion, all are the result of predictive processing. Our eyes move in tiny, rapid jumps called saccades, yet we experience a smooth, uninterrupted world because the brain stitches together predictions to cover the gaps. Reality feels continuous not because it is, but because the brain refuses to show us the empty spaces. In ancient animals, this system appeared in simpler forms. Primitive vertebrates anticipated prey movement. Early amphibians predicted the rhythm of vibrations on land. Reptiles forecast temperature changes to regulate their behavior. The brain became a tool for simulating the world before reacting to it. Evolution discovered that prediction is faster than perception, and survival often favors speed. But prediction comes at a cost. When internal expectations dominate too strongly, perception becomes distorted. The brain may misinterpret signals, leading to errors, false alarms, missed opportunities, illusions. Yet even with these risks, prediction was such a powerful advantage that evolution embedded it deeply into the structure of every brain that followed. By the time mammals appeared, prediction had woven itself into nearly every aspect of neural processing. Emotions began predicting social outcomes. Memory predicted future threats based on past ones. Even sleep evolved in part to refine predictive models, rehearsing scenarios and reorganizing information. The brain no longer just reacted. It imagined. It anticipated. It simulated. Long before minds could dream or imagine, evolution imposed its most unforgiving rule: survive, or vanish. This single law shaped every nervous system that emerged on Earth. And as organisms developed more advanced ways of sensing the world, perception itself became enslaved to this rule. The brain evolved not to reveal truth, but to filter reality through the harsh demands of survival. What creatures perceived was never the full world, it was the world edited, compressed, biased, and distorted for one purpose only: to keep them alive long enough to reproduce. Imagine an early fish drifting through ancient waters. Its visual system does not present a detailed, accurate version of the ocean. Instead, the brain highlights what evolution has deemed important: the sudden flicker of a predator's shadow, the bright shimmer of potential prey, the patterns of the water that hint at safe hiding spots. Everything else, every subtle hue, every unimportant motion, every irrelevant detail, fades into the background. Not because it doesn't exist, but because the brain has decided it doesn't matter. This is the tyranny of survival. Perception is not a window, it is a filter, built to ignore most of reality so the organism can focus on what truly determines life or death. In these early vertebrates, neural circuits began specializing in threat detection. A sudden change in light? Danger. A shift in water pressure? Danger. A certain chemical in the water? Danger. These systems evolved to be hypersensitive, often overreacting. False alarms were acceptable, missed threats were fatal. Evolution prefers anxious survivors to calm corpses. Over time, this bias shaped not only how creatures sensed their environment, but how they interpreted it. Even before conscious thought evolved, the earliest brains carried heavy survival filters. They responded faster to negative stimuli than to positive ones. They prioritized escape responses over curiosity. They invested energy in wariness, not wonder. This survival-centered architecture continued to develop. Early reptiles patrolled their surroundings with sharp vigilance, constantly scanning for danger. Amphibians froze at the hint of movement. Mammals developed rapid startle responses. In each case, the brain amplified what evolution had deemed important, even if it wasn't objectively meaningful. The world they perceived was not the world that existed. It was the world evolution needed them to see. Imagine walking through a prehistoric forest as an early mammal. Every leaf rustle feels like a predator. Every shifting shadow sets off alarms. Your brain is constantly calculating: is this safe? Is this safe? Is this safe? The sensory world becomes a battlefield where every signal is a potential threat. This harsh bias shaped the structure of early brains. Neural pathways that processed danger became stronger and more prioritized. Reflexive behaviors, fight, flight, freezing, became deeply embedded. Hormonal responses evolved to flood the body with energy and focus when danger was perceived, even if the danger was imagined. Evolution did not care about accuracy, only survival probability. Even perception of food, mating opportunities, and territory was sculpted through this lens. Early creatures were drawn to patterns associated with reward, even if the reward was inconsistent. Their sensory systems highlighted whatever increased survival odds, not what produced truthful representation. The brain learned to exaggerate signals that promised benefit and suppress those that held no evolutionary value. In other words, organisms began living not in the real world, but in a version of the world evolution designed for them. This selective perception extended beyond sensory inputs. Primitive emotion-like states began to appear, biological drives rooted in survival. Hunger sharpened focus on food cues. Fear sharpened attention on threats. Curiosity emerged only when conditions were safe enough to explore. Even these simple states acted as perceptual filters, deciding what was important in any given moment. Evolution also sculpted perception across species in different ways depending on their ecological roles. Predators developed sensory systems optimized for detecting motion and predicting trajectories. Prey evolved wide-angle vision to detect approach from any direction. Some animals saw ultraviolet, others detected infrared. The world looked fundamentally different to each species, because each species needed a different perceptual reality to survive. The tyranny of survival dictated every detail. And yet, this harsh system was incredibly effective. It allowed creatures to adapt rapidly, thrive in diverse environments, and navigate complex ecosystems filled with hidden threats. But it also meant perception would always be biased, incomplete, and heavily filtered. Even today, humans inherit these survival-driven biases. We notice negative events faster than positive ones. Our memories cling more tightly to threats than to joys. Our attention is drawn to potential danger even when none exists. These ancient survival circuits still dominate our perception, shaping how we interpret the world. When life first emerged from the oceans onto land, perception faced one of the greatest challenges in evolutionary history. The underwater world had been dim, filtered, and slow. Light scattered gently. Sounds traveled in pressure waves. Smells dissolved and drifted through water. But the land was a completely different universe, brighter, harsher, louder, more chaotic. Every sense that had evolved underwater had to be rebuilt, sharpened, or reinvented to survive in this new world. Imagine the first amphibian-like creatures climbing cautiously onto muddy shorelines. The moment they lifted their eyes above the water's surface, they encountered a radical transformation. Sunlight was no longer softened by water, it struck with blinding intensity. Colors became vivid. Shadows grew sharper. Depth cues expanded dramatically. Vision expanded into a vast three-dimensional world filled with detail and contrast. What had once been a dim, drifting environment became a sprawling landscape that demanded rapid, precise interpretation. This new world introduced countless dangers. Predators lurked in grasses and behind rocks rather than approaching from predictable directions underwater. The sky itself held threats, early reptiles and birds with keen eyesight. Sudden movements were more abrupt. Terrain was uneven. Survival required not only better eyes but faster brains capable of decoding complex patterns. Vision evolved rapidly in this new environment. Eyes sharpened, gaining improved lenses and protective structures. Eyelids and tear ducts evolved to keep the delicate photoreceptors moist. Pupils evolved to adapt to dramatic shifts in brightness. For land dwellers, perception became a balancing act between clarity and protection. But it wasn't just vision that needed reinvention. Sound, underwater, traveled as pressure waves, slow and dull compared to the crisp, rapid waves of air. Early land animals suddenly found themselves in a world filled with high-frequency vibrations, echoes, and subtle cues impossible to detect in water. To survive, their bodies had to modify. Bones in the jaw and skull began transferring vibrations to inner ear structures. These early adaptations would eventually give rise to the modern ear. For the first time, animals could hear the rustle of leaves, the scurry of insects, the distant call of predators. Sound became a map of the invisible, a tool for detecting threats long before they came into view. Smell changed even more dramatically. In water, scent was slow, dissolving gradually through liquid currents. On land, scent exploded into a rich and immediate field of chemical information. Airborne particles carried messages from miles away. A predator's scent trail lingered in the wind. The smell of food, territory, or danger could guide survival decisions long before visual confirmation. As animals developed more refined olfactory systems, they began constructing internal scent landscapes, maps of their surroundings shaped by chemical signals drifting through the air. Smell became one of the most emotionally potent senses, forming the foundation for memory, social bonding, and navigation. Movement also required new forms of perception. Water supports weight, but land does not. The earliest land animals had to develop new sensory systems to detect bodily orientation, balance, and the shifting terrain beneath their limbs. Specialized pressure receptors emerged in feet and limbs. Inner ear structures adapted to help maintain equilibrium. The entire body became a sensory instrument designed to interpret the environment with unprecedented precision. This new sensory landscape reshaped behavior. Underwater life was guided by currents and simple reactions. Land life demanded strategy, caution, planning. Animals needed to interpret complex cues, anticipate movement across distances, and navigate diverse habitats. Perception became more dynamic, more layered, more integrated. The nervous system grew increasingly centralized, with emerging brain structures dedicated to refining these sensory inputs. But the land was not just a place of danger, it was a place of opportunity. Abundant plant life offered new food sources. Insects exploded in diversity, becoming prey for early amphibians and reptiles. New ecological niches encouraged specialization. Some animals evolved keen binocular vision for hunting. Others evolved panoramic sight for detecting threats. Some focused on hearing, others on smell. The land became a sensory battleground filled with diversity and competition. Each species carved its own perceptual reality based on evolutionary needs. A hawk soaring overhead saw sharp contrasts and subtle movements across vast distances. A mouse on the forest floor relied on smell and vibration detection. A frog balanced both, using sight for hunting and hearing for survival. This explosion of sensory evolution ultimately shaped the development of more complex brains. As land animals navigated increasingly intricate environments, they required advanced cognitive tools, memory, spatial awareness, decision-making. Neural circuits expanded. Brain structures diversified. The roots of modern cognition, emotion, and behavior were planted in this ancient transition. Long before complex thoughts and vivid imaginations took shape, smell became one of the earliest gateways between sensation and memory. In the ancient world, long before language or conscious reflection existed, scent was the mind's first archivist, capturing traces of experience and linking them to survival. When early land animals emerged from the oceans, smell exploded into a new dimension. Air carried chemical signals with astonishing speed and precision, revealing stories hidden in the wind, the presence of predators, the trails of prey, the boundaries of territory, and the signals of potential mates. For early mammals, smell became nothing less than a lifeline. Their survival depended on detecting the faintest hints of danger or opportunity carried across vast distances. The olfactory system evolved to become incredibly sensitive, capable of detecting tiny chemical variations that signaled safety or threat. But what made smell uniquely powerful was not just its sensitivity, it was its direct connection to the ancient emotional and memory centers of the brain. Unlike vision or hearing, smell doesn't take a long route through multiple processing centers. Instead, scent molecules interact directly with neural pathways linked to the limbic system, one of the oldest parts of the brain. This system is responsible for emotional responses, instinctual behaviors, and the earliest forms of memory. This is why scent-triggered memories feel instantaneous and deeply emotional even today. The architecture that connects smell to memory is one of the oldest evolutionary structures still active in the human brain. Imagine a small, early mammal, something like a shrew, scurrying through leaf litter at dusk. Its world is shaped less by sight and more by scent. It navigates the complexity of its environment by reading chemical messages, the faint musk of a snake hiding beneath a log, the familiar smell of its den, the scent trail of insects it hunts. Every smell becomes a story, a memory, a warning, or a guide. Each new experience strengthens the association between scent and survival. This deep connection allowed mammals to internalize experiences in ways reptiles could not. A single encounter with a predator could leave a chemical memory that lasted a lifetime. Scent became a way of compressing experience into instinct. Over countless generations, this link between smell and memory became one of the defining features of mammalian life. For many species, smell also became the foundation of social behavior. Early mammals used scent to identify their young, mark territory, attract mates, and signal dominance. A mother could distinguish her offspring by scent alone. Group-living animals developed scent signatures that allowed them to recognize one another in dense foliage where vision failed. Smell, more than any other sense, created the first emotional bonds between individuals. This ability to attach meaning to scent also shaped the development of memory itself. As neural circuits grew more sophisticated, the brain began to store not just raw sensory data but associated emotional states. The scent of a safe shelter created feelings of calm. The scent of a predator evoked terror long after the danger had passed. Memory became layered, sensory, emotional, experiential. These early emotional memories were crucial. They allowed animals to learn from danger without needing repeated encounters. Evolution favored creatures whose brains could rapidly form strong associations between scent and experience. The olfactory system became a powerful predictive tool, enabling organisms to anticipate outcomes based on faint traces in their environment. Even as other senses grew more advanced, vision sharpening, hearing expanding, smell remained deeply intertwined with emotion. The brain's architecture preserved this ancient connection. And eventually, when primates and early humans developed more advanced forms of intelligence, the emotional memory system formed the foundation upon which complex thought, imagination, and identity would grow. But smell also shaped early humans in uniquely profound ways. Before language existed, our ancestors relied heavily on scent for communication and connection. The smell of fire signaled safety. The scent of certain plants marked territory, healing, or poison. Human infants, even today, bond with their caregivers through smell long before they understand sight or sound. This ancient sensory map is embedded deep within us, a quiet reminder of our mammalian origins. The most fascinating aspect of smell is that it never evolved to represent objective reality. Like every other sense, it evolved to filter and assign meaning based on survival. Different species perceive scent entirely differently. A wolf can read an entire narrative from a trail, a story of age, health, emotional state, direction, and purpose. A shark detects minute chemical traces across miles of ocean. Humans experience smell far more weakly, but the emotional impact remains powerful because the architecture beneath it is ancient and untouched. Long before humans closed their eyes and entered vivid inner worlds, the earliest mammals were already experiencing the strange phenomenon we call dreaming. In the deep hours of night, when their small bodies hid from reptilian predators and the world grew still, their brains ignited with bursts of electrical activity. These early dreams were not stories or visions as we know them today. They were chaotic simulations, primitive rehearsals born from neural circuits designed to improve survival. Yet within these first flickers of internal imagery lay the origin of the dreaming brain that humans now take for granted. To understand how dreaming began, picture an early mammal curled inside a hollow log during the late Paleozoic night. Its body is still, its senses dormant, but inside its skull, the brain remains intensely active. Ancient neural pathways replay fragments of the day's experiences. Surges of electrical energy ripple through circuits responsible for movement, fear, memory, and pattern recognition. These flashes are not dreams in the narrative sense, but the earliest form of internal simulation, a way for the brain to reorganize information, strengthen associations, and prepare for future threats. Dreaming evolved because it served a crucial purpose. Mammals were small, vulnerable, and constantly hunted by larger reptiles. Their survival depended not only on reflexes but on the ability to learn quickly and adapt behavior through memory. The sleeping brain became a secret workshop where experiences were sorted, strengthened, or discarded. Night after night, memories were replayed, refined, and converted into instinctive responses. Dreaming was evolution's answer to the need for rapid learning. As neural systems grew more complex, these nightly simulations became more elaborate. The early mammalian brain began linking sensory fragments, sounds, sights, smells, into rough internal models. These mental rehearsals improved the animal's reactions to danger and helped it recognize opportunities. Over millions of years, the sleeping brain transformed into a powerful tool for survival. The evolutionary roots of modern REM, rapid eye movement, sleep can be traced back to these ancient mammals. During REM sleep, the brain becomes highly active, almost indistinguishable from wakefulness. Muscles become paralyzed to prevent acting out dreams, while the mind plunges into an immersive world generated entirely from internal signals. This state allowed early mammals to practice escape behaviors, refine hunting strategies, and reinforce memory circuits, all without the risks of real-world movement. It's no coincidence that REM sleep, dreaming, and emotional memory are tightly linked. In early mammals, emotions were deeply connected to survival: fear, desire, curiosity, bonding. Dreaming allowed the brain to replay emotionally charged events, ensuring that important lessons were not forgotten. A close encounter with a predator might be re-experienced at night, strengthening neural pathways that triggered vigilance and rapid response. Dreaming was a teacher, guiding animals through the challenges of their environment. For social mammals, dreams may have also played a role in strengthening bonds. The brain regions involved in social recognition and emotional attachment also activate strongly during REM sleep. These nightly simulations may have helped early mammals maintain mental maps of their groups, recognize offspring, or refine social hierarchies. Even today, human dreams often revolve around relationships, conflicts, and emotional themes, echoes of ancient mammalian priorities. As evolution continued, dreaming became more complex. Primates, with their advanced visual systems, began generating richer imagery. Early human ancestors developed even more intricate dream worlds, reflecting their expanding cognitive abilities. But the essential function of dreams remained rooted in those ancient nights, organizing memories, predicting outcomes, and preparing the organism for the unpredictable challenges of life. Dreams also provided a safe environment for the brain to explore possibilities. In the waking world, mistakes could be fatal. But in dreams, the brain could experiment. It could simulate danger without consequence. It could explore alternate paths, test responses, or rehearse future situations. This evolutionary benefit shaped the dreaming brain into a simulation engine, an internal universe where consequences were imaginary but the learning was real. Modern neuroscience confirms what evolution began: dreaming is not a passive process. It is an active, dynamic, and deeply meaningful feature of the mammalian mind. During REM sleep, the brain strengthens connections associated with creativity, problem-solving, and emotional resilience. In early mammals, these same processes improved survival. In humans, they support complex thought, imagination, and identity. Even today, dreams blur the line between past, present, and possibility. They weave together fragments of memory, emotion, and imagination in ways that often feel surreal. But beneath the strangeness lies an ancient purpose: the dreaming brain continues to rehearse, reorganize, and refine. The nightly simulations that helped early mammals survive now fuel the creativity and inner life of modern humans. As the age of mammals unfolded, life on Earth entered one of its most intense evolutionary competitions, a cognitive arms race that would shape perception, intelligence, and social behavior in profound ways. Predators became faster, prey became more cautious, environments grew more complex, and the pressures of survival began favoring not just physical traits, but mental ones. Neural systems expanded, perception sharpened, and brains developed new circuits to handle the increasingly intricate challenges of life on land. Nowhere was this cognitive arms race more evident than in the primate lineage. The earliest primates lived high in the canopy, navigating a three-dimensional world filled with branches, shadows, leaves, and predators lurking in silence. To survive in such an environment, they needed exquisitely refined perception. Depth vision became essential. Their eyes evolved to face forward, allowing for binocular overlap and precise 3D mapping of their surroundings. A small misjudgment of distance meant falling from a tree, and evolution did not forgive such mistakes. But vision was only part of the story. These early primates also developed hands capable of delicate grasping. Their tactile perception deepened, allowing them to feel textures, detect small movements, and manipulate objects with precision. This new physical ability demanded a more advanced brain, a neural command center that could integrate sight, touch, balance, and rapid decision-making in fractions of a second. The brain grew larger, more interconnected, and more capable of processing complex sensory streams. As primates became more social, a new challenge emerged: understanding one another. Social complexity introduced a second cognitive arms race layered atop the physical one. Individuals that could read facial expressions, interpret vocal patterns, and anticipate the actions of others gained enormous advantages. Groups needed cohesion to avoid predators, find food, and care for offspring. Any primate that could predict the intentions or emotional states of others had improved chances of survival. This led to an explosion in neurocognitive abilities. Brain regions responsible for emotional perception, empathy, and social intelligence expanded significantly. The ability to recognize subtle shifts in gaze or posture became crucial. Emotional states such as fear, trust, affection, and anger were encoded not just in behavior, but in neural wiring. The mind became a battlefield of interpretations, constantly analyzing, anticipating, and adjusting based on the behavior of others. The competition wasn't limited to social interaction. Primates also had to solve increasingly complex environmental problems. They needed to remember the locations of seasonal fruit trees, navigate large territories, and adapt to unpredictable weather patterns. Memory systems became more sophisticated. Spatial awareness deepened. Curiosity evolved into a survival tool. Organisms willing to explore more and learn faster had an edge over those who remained passive. As intelligence increased, perception itself changed. Primates began to not only sense the world but interpret it in more abstract ways. They developed the ability to categorize objects, recognize patterns, and anticipate outcomes. These early cognitive skills planted the seeds for problem-solving, tool use, and cooperative behavior. Some species began using simple tools, like sticks to extract insects or stones to crack nuts. These actions required planning, a sense of cause and effect, and a mental model of how objects behaved. The cognitive arms race escalated as primates became more socially intertwined. Competition appeared not only between species but within groups. Dominance hierarchies developed. Individuals needed to understand alliances, rivalries, and social cues. A misinterpreted gesture could mean losing status or facing aggression. In response, primates became increasingly skilled at deception, empathy, and strategic thinking. The ability to mentally simulate another's perspective, an early form of theory of mind, became an evolutionary advantage. This social pressure shaped perception in unique ways. The brain became finely tuned to detect micro-expressions, subtle tone shifts, and complex emotional signals. Much of what primates perceived was not the environment itself, but the meanings hidden within the social world. Survival depended on understanding not just what others were doing, but why they were doing it. Over millions of years, these pressures reshaped the primate brain into a remarkably flexible organ capable of learning, memory, empathy, and anticipation. Evolution had gradually moved perception from simple detection to complex interpretation. By the time early hominins emerged, they were inheriting a brain already prepared for complexity, a brain built for cooperation, competition, communication, and emotional depth. Their perceptual systems were not just survival tools but the foundation for the next great evolutionary leap: symbolic thought, language, and culture. Long before humans built civilizations, long before they painted stories on cave walls or shaped words into meaning, our ancestors reached a profound turning point. They began to perceive the world not just as it was, but as it could be represented. This shift, from raw sensory perception to symbolic thought, was one of the most extraordinary leaps in the history of the mind. It marked the moment when perception transcended survival and became a creative force capable of reshaping reality itself. Symbolic thinking did not emerge suddenly. It was built on millions of years of neural evolution, pattern recognition, social intelligence, memory, emotion. As early hominins roamed the savannas of Africa, they relied heavily on their ability to interpret patterns in nature, the direction of animal tracks, the timing of seasons, the movements of predators. These skills slowly began to merge with a growing cognitive ability, the capacity to represent ideas internally. Imagine an early hominin standing at the edge of a forest, holding a stone. The stone is not merely a hard object, it is potential. With a few strikes, it becomes a tool. With more refinement, it becomes a weapon. This transformation required a mental leap, the idea that one thing could stand for another, that an object could represent a purpose, a function, or a future outcome. The stone meant something beyond itself. Symbolic cognition had begun. As this ability expanded, early humans started linking sounds with meanings. Grunts evolved into patterns. Patterns into signals. Signals into proto-words. Communication, once limited to gestures and instinctive calls, became flexible and abstract. A sound could represent a concept, an event, or a memory. This was no longer simple perception, it was perception enhanced by internal symbols. This new symbolic awareness transformed how early humans interacted with the world. They began to create tools with specific intentions, crafting them not just as extensions of their bodies but as physical representations of ideas. A hand axe was not merely a stone, it was an expression of skill, planning, and identity. Over generations, toolmaking evolved into a cultural language, with techniques passed down, refined, and expanded. Art emerged next, not as decoration, but as a deeper expression of this symbolic mind. Early cave paintings in places like Chauvet and Lascaux weren't mere sketches of animals, they were attempts to capture meaning, memory, and significance. Humans painted what mattered emotionally and spiritually. They recorded hunts not to document them, but to give them symbolic power, perhaps to communicate, perhaps to teach, perhaps to invoke. Through this, perception evolved again. The brain no longer relied solely on physical stimuli. Internal symbols, images, sounds, concepts, became just as real in shaping decisions and understanding the world. Humans could imagine outcomes, plan rituals, and create narratives that united groups. The world outside and the world inside began to blur. Symbolic thought also transformed social life. Stories emerged, myths, warnings, lessons passed orally across generations. These stories became mental tools that sharpened perception, teaching individuals what to fear, what to seek, and what to believe. A group's collective perception of reality became shaped by shared symbols. Fire was not just warmth, it became a symbol of community. An animal was not just prey, it might be a totem. A river was not just water, it could be a boundary between life and death. As symbols grew in complexity, so did cooperation. Humans formed larger groups because symbols created shared meaning. Rituals strengthened identity. Marks carved into wood or bones became early attempts at written communication. Memory expanded beyond the individual and became a communal structure, stories stored in minds, told and retold, forming the first foundations of culture. This symbolic revolution also reshaped emotional perception. Early humans felt connection not only to their group but to their ancestors, their environment, and imagined beings that lived in storms, stars, and dreams. The boundary between physical and spiritual reality softened. The brain began interacting with a world partly constructed by imagination. Symbolic thinking made humans capable of perceiving things that didn't exist physically: futures, fantasies, fears, gods, and meaning itself. This ability allowed humans to plan complex strategies, form moral codes, and navigate social relationships with unprecedented depth. But it also introduced vulnerabilities. Symbols could deceive. Beliefs could override direct perception. The human mind became capable of not just interpreting reality, but misinterpreting it, sometimes beautifully, sometimes disastrously. Yet even these flaws demonstrated the power of symbolic cognition. A mind no longer bound by immediate perception was capable of reaching far beyond survival. Section 12 ends with humanity standing on the edge of a new cognitive horizon. With symbols, perception had evolved from a sensory tool into a creative force. Truth, imagination, memory, and meaning intertwined. And from this intricate web, a new illusion began to form, the illusion of a stable, present moment, crafted not by the world, but by the brain itself. Long before modern humans contemplated time or questioned consciousness, evolution had already engineered one of the greatest perceptual illusions of all, the sensation of a present moment. To every creature on Earth, the world feels immediate, fresh, unfolding in real time. But neuroscience and evolutionary logic reveal a deeper truth: the present moment is not something we receive from reality, it is something the brain constructs. What we call now is a carefully woven tapestry of delayed signals, predictive guesses, and stitched-together fragments of sensory input. The illusion exists because the brain faces a nearly impossible challenge. Every sense processes information at different speeds. Light reaches the retina almost instantly, but sound takes longer to process. Touch, smell, and internal body states each carry their own delays. If the brain displayed raw sensory input as it arrived, reality would feel chaotic, out of sync, jittery, and confusing. Instead, evolution created an elegant workaround: the brain waits a fraction of a second, gathers incoming signals, and blends them into a unified story. This delay, around 1/10 of a second, goes unnoticed, but it is the foundation of the present. To survive, early animals needed coherence more than accuracy. A unified perceptual moment helped them track prey, avoid predators, and coordinate movement. The illusion of now smoothed the sensory world into something usable. Even in ancient vertebrates, the brain was already adjusting and predicting, aligning signals so the organism could respond effectively. The world felt stable because the brain could not afford chaos. As brains grew more complex, this stitching became more sophisticated. Early mammals running from predators needed to anticipate movement, not just react to it. Instead of waiting for full information, their brains began predicting the next moment before it arrived. Sensory input was used not only to build the present, but to correct the brain's predictions about what should be happening. Perception became a combination of memory, expectation, and sensation. Imagine an early hominin tracking prey across a savanna. The organism doesn't see the animal precisely as it is, it sees a projection, a predicted position based on a constantly updated model. If the brain waited for perfect accuracy, the prey would escape. The present must always be slightly ahead of reality. Evolution had turned perception into a controlled hallucination calibrated by sensory feedback. This predictive nature of perception means that the present moment is a blend of what is happening, what just happened, and what the brain expects to happen next. The mind quietly erases the gaps between eye movements. It fills in blind spots. It smooths transitions. It edits inconsistencies. What feels like a continuous stream of experience is actually a series of constructed frames stitched into a seamless narrative. Even time itself is subjective. In moments of danger, fear floods the brain and accelerates processing, making time feel slower. In states of safety or boredom, the brain relaxes prediction precision, and time feels faster. Early humans relied on these distortions for survival, slowed time during threats, heightened awareness, allowing quicker reaction. Time perception shifted depending on emotional intensity, hunger, exhaustion, or environmental uncertainty. Memory also plays a crucial role in creating the illusion of the present. Every moment we perceive includes a trace of the recent past, information held briefly in sensory buffers. This lingering imprint allows the brain to maintain continuity. Without it, the world would feel like a flickering slideshow of disconnected images. Early humans navigating dense forests needed this continuity to avoid danger. Movement required predicting where the body would be before it arrived. The illusion of a stable present made complex motor coordination possible. But this illusion comes with consequences. Because the brain operates on prediction, it often mistakes expectation for reality. We sometimes mishear words, misinterpret gestures, or recall events incorrectly, not because perception fails, but because the brain is performing exactly as evolution designed it to. It fills in what it expects to see rather than what is truly there. This became even more pronounced as humans developed language, culture, and symbolic thought. The present moment became intertwined with beliefs and narratives. People began perceiving not just sensory reality but the emotional and symbolic layers their cultures constructed. What humans experience as now is shaped not only by the brain's neural delays but by stories, memories, fears, biases, and expectations. The illusion is adaptive. Without it, consciousness would fracture. But it also means that two people can inhabit vastly different perceptual worlds even when standing in the same physical space. Each brain stitches together its own version of reality based on its experiences, predictions, and needs. Section 13 closes with a profound revelation. The present moment feels real, immediate, and undeniable, but it is a masterpiece of biological engineering, a carefully crafted illusion built to keep us alive. And as evolution continues to shape the human mind, this illusion will lay the foundation for an even deeper inability to see the world as it is, because perception is about to collide with its biggest limitation, the boundaries of human sensory experience. For millions of years, evolution sculpted the brain into a master interpreter, not a mirror of reality, but a filter that extracts only the information necessary for survival. As humans evolved, this filtering became even more intense. Despite our confidence in our senses, we experience only the faintest sliver of the true world. The universe around us is overflowing with signals, electromagnetic waves, vibrations, chemical traces, subatomic interactions, yet the human brain captures only a tiny fraction. What we perceive is not reality itself, but a curated version of it, crafted by neural systems that prioritize usefulness over accuracy. Take vision, for example. Humans can only see a narrow band of the electromagnetic spectrum. We call it visible light, but this is a biological accident, not a universal truth. Bees see ultraviolet patterns hidden from our eyes. Snakes detect infrared heat signatures invisible to us. Birds perceive magnetic fields as glowing lines across the sky. To each species, the world appears radically different because each brain selects different information to construct its internal reality. Humans inhabit only one of countless perceptual worlds, a version shaped by ancient adaptations, not objective truth. Even within our limited sensory range, the brain aggressively edits what we perceive. If we processed every detail, the texture of every surface, the flicker of every light, the micro-movements of every leaf, the world would overwhelm us within seconds. Instead, the brain ignores almost everything, focusing only on what matters for our goals, fears, or expectations. This selective attention creates blind spots far larger than the literal blind spot on our retina. We fail to notice obvious changes, overlook critical details, and often see only what our minds expect to see. This filtering is not a flaw, it is the brain's survival strategy. The world is too complex to process in raw form. So the brain simplifies, smooths, categorizes, and guesses. When it encounters ambiguity, it fills in missing information with predictions. When sensory input is too slow, the brain simulates the future to stay ahead. When memory is incomplete, it reconstructs rather than retrieves. At every moment, perception is a negotiation between reality and expectation, an internal story updated just enough to remain useful. But these shortcuts come with illusions. Consider how easily we are fooled by optical patterns, false motion, afterimages, or distorted shapes. These illusions reveal how the brain imposes structure where there is none, fills in details that don't exist, and interprets patterns based on prior experience rather than objective input. In the ancient world, these biases helped our ancestors survive. In the modern world, they expose the limitations of perception with startling clarity. Hearing, too, is selective. The ears capture only a narrow range of frequencies, ignoring countless vibrations. A dog hears tones we cannot. A bat perceives high-frequency echoes that form a three-dimensional sonic world. Humans hear what evolution allowed us to hear, just enough to navigate our environment, communicate with one another, and detect important threats. Everything else is silence, not because the world is quiet, but because our nervous system is deaf to it. Touch is not a direct measure of the world either. The brain constructs sensations from pressure signals, temperature receptors, and pain pathways, weaving them into a cohesive narrative of the body. Yet these sensations can be misleading. A single nerve glitch can produce phantom pain in a missing limb. Temperature can feel different depending on expectation. Softness, roughness, and texture can shift based on context. The sense of the body is an illusion of completeness built by neural integration. Memory further distorts perception. We assume memories are stored like files, but they are reconstructed each time we recall them. The brain fills gaps with assumptions, blends events together, and reshapes the past to fit the present. Our sense of continuity, our feeling that we have a stable identity and an accurate timeline, is built on fragile reconstructions, not reliable records. Evolution didn't care if our memories were perfect. It only cared that they were useful. Emotion also shapes what we perceive. Fear amplifies threats. Desire amplifies opportunities. Sadness narrows attention, while joy expands it. Early humans depended on emotional filtering to make quick decisions about danger or reward. That emotional bias remains embedded in everything we perceive today. Two people standing next to each other may experience different realities because their emotional states amplify different aspects of the world. And yet, despite these distortions, our perception feels complete, seamless, truthful. This confidence is itself an illusion. The brain hides its shortcuts from us to maintain coherence. If we notice the gaps, the blind spots, the delays, the predictions, the edits, we would lose the stability needed to function. The illusion of accurate perception is essential for navigating the world, even if it is not accurate at all. Section 14 closes with a powerful realization: we do not see reality, we see a version of reality crafted by evolution to help us survive, not to help us understand the universe. And as this filtered experience becomes more complex, the brain begins to blur the line between perception and imagination, leading to an even more astonishing truth: much of what we perceive is a dream we experience while awake. Long before humans built stories, philosophies, or civilizations, the brain had already mastered a strange and powerful ability: the art of hallucinating reality. Even in full daylight, long before sleep arrives, the waking brain fills in gaps, smooths over inconsistencies, and constructs a continuous story from fragmentary sensory input. What we experience as the world around us is not the raw physical universe, it is a controlled hallucination, stabilized by the feedback of our senses. And every moment we are awake, the brain is dreaming with its eyes open. This waking dream begins with prediction. Evolution discovered that the fastest way to survive was not to wait for sensory input but to guess what would happen next. The brain became a predictive machine, constantly generating expectations and comparing them to real-world signals. When the signals match the expectation, the brain allows the hallucination to continue. When they don't, the brain adjusts the dream slightly, correcting it just enough to stay aligned with reality. Imagine walking through a forest. Your brain does not process every leaf, every stick, every shadow. Instead, it constructs a simplified model of the forest and updates only what changes. If a bird moves or a branch snaps, your brain adjusts the simulation. If nothing unexpected happens, the internal hallucination continues seamlessly. This saves enormous energy and keeps perception fast enough to react to threats. But it also means that much of what you see is not really there, it is your brain's best guess. Even familiar objects are partly hallucinated. When you look at a cup, your brain predicts its shape, weight, texture, and function before your senses confirm anything. When you hear half a word, your brain fills in the rest. When you read a sentence, your brain predicts the words before your eyes finish scanning them. This predictive filling in is so efficient that you rarely notice the gaps. But this system has vulnerabilities. When the brain's predictions overpower sensory input, illusions occur. Optical illusions trick the brain into confirming something that isn't true. Auditory illusions make us hear patterns in noise. Even memory illusions, where the brain confidently remembers events that never happened, arise from the same predictive mechanism. In these moments, the waking dream becomes slightly disconnected from reality, exposing how much of our perception is constructed. This phenomenon can be traced back to early mammals and primates. Their survival depended on forecasting danger, anticipating movement, and recognizing patterns quickly. As the brain evolved, these predictive capacities expanded into areas beyond survival. They shaped imagination, creativity, and even identity. Humans began to dream not just while asleep, but while conscious, constructing meaning, forecasting the future, and mentally rehearsing possibilities. Emotion plays a major role in shaping the waking dream. Fear exaggerates threats. Joy amplifies beauty. Anxiety fills in negative possibilities even when none exist. Hope imagines positive outcomes. These emotional overlays evolved because they helped early humans navigate uncertainty. An anxious brain erred on the side of caution, while an optimistic brain persevered in the face of difficulty. Today, these emotional hallucinations shape nearly everything we perceive. Social perception is another domain where waking dreams dominate. When humans look at a stranger, they often perceive intentions, emotions, or attitudes that may not be real. The brain fills in personality traits based on subtle cues, posture, tone, gaze. These judgments can be inaccurate, but they helped early humans assess danger or opportunity quickly. The waking dream extends not only to objects but to other minds. Memory further blurs the line between perception and imagination. Every time we recall a memory, we reconstruct it from fragments, altering details based on our current emotions and expectations. These reconstructed memories then feed back into the waking dream, shaping how we interpret new experiences. The past and present blend together, forming an ever-evolving internal narrative. In a sense, reality becomes a collaborative project between the brain and the world. Sensory input provides rough outlines, the brain fills in everything else. The external world offers constraints, keeping the dream grounded, but the internal world provides the structure. Without this internal simulation, perception would be too slow and disjointed to support complex behavior. With it, perception becomes fluid, fast, and adaptive, but always slightly biased. In modern humans, the waking dream has grown even more powerful. Culture, language, stories, and beliefs all feed into the predictive machinery, shaping how individuals perceive the world. Two people standing in the same room may experience completely different realities based on their expectations, fears, and memories. The waking dream becomes deeply personal, a reflection of a lifetime of accumulated experiences. Yet, despite these distortions, this controlled hallucination is not a flaw, it is the secret behind all high-level cognition. Without the waking dream, humans could not imagine futures, create art, solve problems, or develop empathy. The ability to project beyond sensory input is the foundation of human creativity and intelligence. Section 15 closes with a powerful understanding: even in full consciousness, the brain is dreaming, constructing a reality that feels solid but is actually a fluid, predictive creation. And as evolution continues, this internal simulation will be shaped even more by one force above all others: the emotional world that gives meaning, depth, and urgency to every moment we perceive. Long before humans wrote poetry or felt the weight of heartbreak, emotion had already taken root as one of evolution's most powerful tools. The earliest mammals, living in a world filled with predators, scarcity, and uncertainty, needed a rapid internal signaling system, something that could override every other process in the brain and force immediate action. Emotion became that system. It shaped perception, biased attention, prioritized memories, and influenced every decision an organism made. Over millions of years, emotion evolved from simple survival signals into a rich inner landscape, a theater in which the mind interprets the meaning of the world. Emotion did not begin as the complex experience humans know today. In the beginning, it was a biological alarm system. A sudden rustle in the grass triggered fear, a surge of energy, heightened senses, and rapid decision-making. The smell of food triggered anticipation and approach. The presence of offspring triggered care. These emotional states were shortcuts, designed to bypass slow cognitive processes and ensure immediate survival. They were not reflections on the world, they were commands rooted in instinct. But even these early emotions influenced perception. Fear narrowed attention, sharpening the senses toward danger while suppressing irrelevant details. Curiosity expanded awareness, encouraging exploration and learning. Pleasure acted as reinforcement, strengthening behaviors that improved survival. Each emotional response altered how organisms interpreted the world, turning perception into something fluid, dynamic, and deeply biased. As mammals became more social, emotions grew increasingly complex. Bonding, affection, jealousy, and grief emerged as powerful evolutionary forces. A mother's love ensured the survival of vulnerable offspring. Social attachment increased group cohesion, giving early mammals better protection against predators. Emotional pain discouraged social isolation, which could be deadly in the ancient world. These emotional systems were not luxuries, they were survival mechanisms encoded into the nervous system. Imagine early primates navigating dense forests. Their lives depended not only on avoiding predators but on understanding the emotional cues of others, the tension in a rival's posture, the relaxed signals of safety, the anxious movements of group members sensing danger. Emotion became a language deeper than sound, a shared system of signals that shaped group dynamics. The ability to perceive emotion in others allowed primates to predict behavior, avoid conflict, and strengthen alliances. As brain structures evolved, especially the limbic system and prefrontal cortex, emotion became intertwined with memory. Events charged with strong emotion were stored with greater intensity, preserved for longer periods, and recalled more vividly. This was evolutionary wisdom: remembering fear made avoidance more effective, remembering joy reinforced beneficial behaviors. Perception itself became colored by emotional memory. A place associated with past danger felt dangerous. A face associated with comfort felt safe. Even when nothing threatening or rewarding was present, emotion filled in the meaning. This emotional overlay shaped the development of the human mind far more deeply than we often realize. Humans do not perceive the world objectively, they perceive it emotionally. A forest may look peaceful to one person and frightening to another. A stranger may appear trustworthy or suspicious based on subtle emotional cues. The mind's theater of emotion influences not only what we focus on but how we interpret every detail. When early humans began forming tribes and communities, emotions took on even greater significance. Cooperation, empathy, compassion, and loyalty became essential for group survival. The brain adapted to accommodate these new emotional demands. Humans developed neural circuits capable of simulating the emotional states of others, what we now call empathy. This ability allowed early humans to coordinate, share resources, comfort the distressed, and punish the disloyal. Emotion became the foundation of moral intuitions and social norms. But emotion also introduced deep internal conflict. The same systems that created love also allowed for jealousy. The systems that encouraged caution also fueled anxiety. The systems that supported bonding also made loss devastating. Emotion sculpted the richness of human life, but it also made suffering possible. Evolution did not design emotion for happiness, it designed it for survival. Happiness, sadness, fear, and desire became tools for navigating a dangerous and unpredictable world. Over time, as human cognition expanded, the mind began weaving emotion into stories. Experiences were not just felt, they were interpreted, narrated, and remembered. Emotion shaped identity, turning perception into a deeply personal journey. Two people could experience the same event and walk away with completely different interpretations because their emotional worlds filtered the meaning. Today, this theater of emotion still governs perception. We notice what we fear. We remember what we love. We ignore what feels irrelevant. The emotional mind shapes how we see ourselves, others, and the world around us. It influences decisions more deeply than logic ever could, guiding our actions before we even understand why. Section 16 closes with a powerful realization: emotion is not an accessory to perception, it is its director. It decides which scenes matter, which details fade, and which experiences become chapters in the story of our lives. And in the next stage of evolution, this emotional perception will extend outward, shaping not just individuals but entire societies through shared beliefs, collective stories, and the human dream we build together. Human beings did not rise to dominance because they were the strongest, the fastest, or the most physically formidable animals. They rose because they discovered something far more powerful than muscle or claw, something invisible yet world-shaping. Early humans learned to share dreams. Not the dreams of sleep, but the dreams of meaning, belief, identity, and story. Through this astonishing ability, separate minds learned to synchronize. Individual perceptions fused into collective worlds. And from those shared worlds came everything that would define our species: culture, religion, society, morality, cooperation, conflict, civilization. But this ability did not appear suddenly. It was forged through millions of years of evolution, built atop emotional intelligence, social awareness, symbolic thinking, and the brain's deep-rooted desire to make sense of chaos. To understand how collective realities emerged, imagine the earliest humans scattered across the African plains. Their lives were fragile, brief, and filled with danger. Survival depended not only on individual skill but on group cohesion. A single human could not fight off a lion, track prey for miles, or raise children alone. But a group, united by shared purpose, could do what no single animal could. This unity did not arise through instinct alone. Instinct binds animals into herds and packs, but only loosely. Human groups needed something more than instinct. They needed a common story, a shared interpretation of reality that helped them coordinate behavior, emotions, and decisions. And so, around fires lit against the dark of ancient nights, early humans began shaping narratives that filled the world with meaning. These stories became the first collective dreams. Early humans looked at thunderstorms, eclipses, disease, and death, forces they did not understand, and filled them with symbolic explanations. Spirits lived in the sky. Ancestors whispered through the wind. Animals possessed souls. Trees held memory. Fire itself became not just heat but the first storyteller, flickering shadows onto cave walls that danced like living spirits. These were not illusions born from ignorance. They were tools for survival, anchoring uncertain lives with shared beliefs. When a tribe believed a river held spiritual significance, they protected it. When they believed ancestors guided hunts, they followed rituals that encouraged discipline, focus, and unity. When they believed certain actions angered unseen forces, they avoided behaviors that threatened group stability. These collective dreams structured society long before laws or governments existed. But the roots of these dreams went even deeper, into the architecture of the human brain. The brain evolved to detect patterns, interpret intentions, assign agency, and create narratives. It did this because pattern recognition helped early humans avoid danger. Agency detection helped them predict threats. Narrative thinking helped them remember lessons. These mechanisms, designed for survival, also allowed humans to imagine forces they could not see. The brain, built to survive the savannah, became capable of imagining gods. Whether or not these imagined beings existed externally was irrelevant. What mattered was that they existed internally, and because many brains shared the same stories, these internal visions formed an external reality. A deity believed by a group becomes real in its influence. A rule followed by a tribe becomes real in its consequences. A symbol respected by a people becomes real in its power. Collective realities are not illusions. They are emergent truths born from shared belief. These shared beliefs allowed early humans to cooperate at scales no other animal could match. While chimpanzees could coordinate in small groups, they were limited by biology. Only individuals who knew each other could work together. Humans broke this limitation. A human could cooperate with a stranger simply by invoking a shared belief, a common ancestor, a shared god, a tribal symbol, a ritual gesture. These symbolic connectors were the first social technologies. With these technologies, humans transcended the limitations of kinship. Villages formed. Tribes formed. Eventually, entire cultures emerged, collections of minds dreaming the same dream. Consider the rise of language. Words were not just sounds, they were containers of shared meaning. A word could represent food, danger, a promise, a memory, or a future possibility. Through language, humans externalized their thoughts and internalized the thoughts of others. Minds became interconnected, weaving individual perspectives into a communal tapestry. With language came storytelling, and storytelling became the engine of collective reality. A single myth could guide moral behavior, unify a tribe, or ignite courage before a hunt. A shared story about origins gave people a sense of purpose. A shared story about the future gave them hope. These stories were not merely entertainment, they were survival strategies encoded in narrative form. Over time, collective realities grew more elaborate. Instead of simply organizing tribes, they began organizing entire civilizations. When agriculture emerged, humans needed even larger shared systems, concepts like property, territory, inheritance, and justice. These ideas did not exist in nature. They existed only in the minds of humans. Yet, because enough people believed in them, they reshaped human behavior on a massive scale. The idea of ownership allowed cooperation among thousands. The idea of law allowed order among strangers. The idea of kingship created hierarchical societies. The idea of money allowed trade across vast distances. Money is perhaps the most striking example of a collective dream. A piece of metal, a carved stone, or printed paper has no inherent value. But humans agreed it had value, and therefore it did. A belief shared by millions became more powerful than any physical object. This is the heart of collective reality. It becomes real because we all agree to believe in it. Religions emerged as the most intricate collective realities. They offered cosmic explanations, moral frameworks, rituals, and shared identity. They bound communities with the strength of narrative and emotional resonance. Whether through shamans, priests, prophets, or elders, religious stories gave meaning to life and comfort in death. They turned the chaos of existence into structured metaphors, embedding human experiences within grand cosmic designs. Nations, too, became symbolic constructions. A border is not a physical line, it is a collective dream. A flag is not inherently powerful, it gains power because people project meaning onto it. Patriotism, loyalty, and identity are emotional connections to shared symbols. Entire armies have marched, died, and conquered because of dreams that existed only in human minds. But collective realities are not only large and political. They exist in families, friendships, communities, and relationships. A marriage is a collective reality, two people agreeing on shared meaning. A family tradition is a collective reality, memories interpreted through repeated rituals. Even love itself is a shared perceptual world, a unique dream built by two minds interpreting each other. These collective perceptions shape not only social experiences but individual psychology. A child raised in a culture of fear perceives the world as threatening. A child raised in a culture of trust perceives it as safe. Adults carry these early collective dreams into their personal realities, shaping how they interpret work, relationships, morality, and meaning. Yet these shared realities can also fracture. When groups hold incompatible dreams, different gods, different truths, different identities, conflict arises. Wars are battles between collective stories. Revolutions occur when collective realities shift. Social progress emerges when old dreams are replaced by new ones. Collective realities are powerful because they are built from the same mechanisms that shape individual perception, emotion, memory, and prediction. When many minds synchronize these mechanisms, the resulting dream becomes stronger than any individual mind. It can uplift civilizations, or destroy them. But despite their complexity, all collective dreams trace back to a single evolutionary advantage, the ability to imagine together. No other species shares such synchronized perception. No other species constructs worlds of meaning from symbols. No other species binds generations through story. This is humanity's superpower. The ability to create shared reality allowed humans to build everything from ancient tribes to modern nations, from spiritual traditions to scientific communities, from local myths to global technologies. It allowed knowledge to accumulate, culture to evolve, and society to expand. And underlying all of this is one profound truth: humans do not live in a single reality. They live in thousands of overlapping realities, personal dreams, cultural dreams, religious dreams, national dreams, emotional dreams, all layered together like translucent worlds. Some of these dreams align. Others collide. But together, they form the tapestry of human experience. Section 17 closes with the recognition that humanity's greatest strength is not physical power or individual intelligence, it is the ability to share worlds. To synchronize minds. To believe, imagine, and dream together. Because when humans dream collectively, they do not just interpret reality. They create it. For millions of years, the brain perfected the art of building a stable illusion, threading together fragments of light, sound, and sensation into a continuous story we call reality. This delicate construction is so seamless, so convincing, that we rarely question it. But sometimes, the machinery falters. Sometimes, the brain loses its grip on the simulation it worked so hard to maintain. And when that happens, perception reveals its hidden scaffolding. The cracks show. The edges of reality ripple and distort. The boundary between what is real and what is imagined dissolves like footprints disappearing in a rising tide. To understand why perception breaks, we must first understand why it ever needed to be stable. For prehistoric animals, the world was an unforgiving arena. Predators stalked from shadows, prey vanished in split seconds, storms descended without warning. The brain evolved to simplify this chaos, to build a cohesive model of the world that could guide reaction and decision. This internal model wasn't designed to be perfect, it was designed to be useful. A wrong but fast interpretation was often more valuable than a slow but accurate one. But usefulness has limits. And in those limits, we find the roots of broken perception. Imagine the earliest mammals, small, vulnerable creatures living in the long shadow of reptilian dominance. Their survival depended on interpreting faint signals in the dark. A sound too soft, a scent too weak, a flicker too faint, each could imply danger or opportunity. Their brains filled the gaps, expanding whispers into warnings. Over time, these survival-driven exaggerations formed the basis for something we now recognize as anxiety, the perception of danger where none exists. Anxiety was not a modern curse, it was an ancient adaptation. But when the gap-filling mechanism became too sensitive, perception slipped into error. Shadows turned into predators. Sounds became threats. The world twisted into a place more dangerous than reality itself. This was one of the earliest forms of perceptual break. But the brain didn't stop there. As species evolved more complex nervous systems, the internal model of the world grew richer, more predictive, and more imaginative. With imagination came creativity, but also the possibility of hallucination. When the brain's predictive circuits ran too freely, internal images began leaking into the sensory world. An ancient hominin wandering alone at night, exhausted and hungry, might hear voices in the wind or see shapes forming in the darkness. These hallucinations were not supernatural, they were the brain attempting to interpret uncertainty by projecting patterns from within. Imagination and hallucination share a thin boundary. One is controlled, the other uncontrolled. Both come from the same neural machinery. Even today, the human brain hallucinates far more than we realize. Every night when we dream, perception fully detaches from the outside world. Neurons fire in elaborate patterns, generating landscapes, characters, sounds, and emotions out of thin air. These dreams are not meaningless, they are the brain's way of reorganizing memory, resolving emotional tension, and exploring possibilities. But dreams are also reminders. Without sensory input to anchor it, the brain will create its own reality. Sleep is the brain hallucinating with permission. Psychosis is the brain hallucinating without it. To understand the fragility of perception, imagine standing alone in a desert at dusk. Heat blurs the air. Your body is dehydrated. Your brain, desperate to maintain function, begins filling in sensory gaps with guesses. Shadows take shape as figures, distant shimmering pools appear as water. These are mirages, illusions born of stress and need. Evolution designed the brain to choose false positives over false negatives. It is better, evolution decided, to see water where none exists than to miss water where it does. But this logic means the brain is always teetering on the edge of misperception. Even in healthy, well-functioning brains, perception breaks in small but revealing ways. Illusions exploit assumptions we never knew we had. A straight line appears bent because our brain expects perspective. A static image seems to move because the brain anticipates motion. Two identical shades look different based on context because the brain interprets relative meaning, not absolute value. Each illusion exposes the shortcuts the brain uses to create coherence. And in doing so, they reveal the hidden truth: perception is a suggestion, not a snapshot. But the most dramatic breakdowns occur when sensory input is disrupted or overwhelmed. In deep caves devoid of light, explorers often report hearing whisper-like noises, feeling invisible presences, or sensing that something is watching them. Sensory deprivation strips the brain of external signals, forcing it to rely entirely on prediction, and prediction quickly becomes hallucination. The brain begins inventing input to fill the void, confirming that reality is not something delivered to us, it is something built moment by moment. In the opposite extreme, sensory overload, the brain can collapse in a different way. A sudden explosion of noise or chaos can fragment perception, breaking it into disjointed pieces. The mind struggles to organize the flood, forcing the person to cling to fragments that may or may not be accurate. Trauma often works this way. In moments of shock, time dilates, sounds distort, memories fragment. These distortions are not side effects, they are the brain protecting itself by shifting into an emergency processing mode. But once the moment passes, the fractured perception lingers, creating echoes of fear long after the danger is gone. Evolution designed perception to serve survival, not truth. And survival sometimes requires distortion. One of the most revealing windows into perceptual breakdown is the effect of psychedelic substances. Plants like psilocybin mushrooms or peyote have been used for thousands of years in rituals across cultures. These substances temporarily disrupt the brain's hierarchical predictive structure. Normally, the brain's top layers, responsible for beliefs, identity, and interpretation, exert control over lower sensory areas. Psychedelics loosen this grip, allowing sensory input and emotional states to blend in ways normally impossible. Colors intensify. Patterns twist. The boundary between self and world dissolves. The brain's dreamlike creativity spills into waking consciousness. These experiences can feel profound, terrifying, or transcendent. They reveal how perception can shift dramatically when the balance between prediction and sensation is altered. They also demonstrate that reality, as we know it, depends on constraint. When the brain stops filtering, the world becomes too much, too intense, too meaningful, too interconnected. Just as sensory distortion exposes the mechanics of perception, memory distortion reveals its fragility. The brain reconstructs memories each time they are recalled, blending old information with new emotional context. Over time, memories drift, changing shape like sand dunes. We think we remember accurately, but we remember meaning, not detail. In traumatic memories, the brain can misfile information, causing past events to feel vividly present. In false memories, the brain fills gaps with imagined details that feel just as real as true ones. Every distorted memory is a reminder that the brain is not a recorder, it is a storyteller. Delusions, too, arise when the brain protects its internal narrative at the expense of accuracy. When internal models become rigid and sensory contradictions are ignored, a person can become trapped inside a self-reinforcing story. In ancient times, these experiences were often interpreted as possession, divine messages, or spiritual visions. Today we understand them as extreme forms of the same predictive mechanisms that guide everyday perception. Even emotion can break perception. Fear sharpens some senses while dulling others. Love creates blind spots. Anger exaggerates threat. Grief alters time. Joy can distort risk assessment. In each case, emotion reshapes perception not out of malfunction but out of evolutionary necessity. A grieving early human mother needed to stay close to her tribe, so her perception of danger heightened. A hunter experiencing triumph needed to take risks to feed his group, so his perception of threat diminished. Perception breaks because perception bends, and bending is what kept our ancestors alive. But perhaps the most striking breakdown of perception occurs in mystical or near-death experiences. Reports from people across cultures and eras describe tunnels of light, encounters with lost loved ones, sensations of floating outside the body. These experiences feel intensely real, yet they reveal how the brain behaves in moments of extreme stress. When oxygen levels drop or neural pathways shut down, the brain floods with disinhibited activity. Vision compresses. Time fragments. Memory activates. The self dissolves. These experiences are not evidence of supernatural realms, they are evidence of the brain's final attempt to maintain a narrative when its systems begin to fail. What makes them remarkable is how consistent they are, suggesting that the breakdown follows specific neural patterns deeply rooted in our evolutionary history. Through all these examples, hallucinations, illusions, dreams, trauma, psychedelics, memory distortion, emotional bias, the same core truth emerges: perception is not passive. It is active. It is constructed. It is maintained with effort and can fracture when the conditions that stabilize it collapse. And yet, these fractures are not simply signs of weakness, they are signs of how perception works. The cracks show the structure beneath the surface. They expose the machinery of consciousness. To study perception breaking is to study perception itself. Because the moment the illusion wavers, the moment the internal model becomes visible, we finally understand: reality is not given to us. Reality is negotiated. Reality is predicted. Reality is sculpted inside the skull. Section 18 closes with a haunting realization: when perception breaks, it does not show us madness. It shows us truth, the truth that the brain's greatest masterpiece is not accuracy, but coherence. It shows us that reality is a fragile collaboration between what exists and what we expect. In its breaking, perception reveals itself. Long before the first human gazed upward and wondered where the stars came from, long before early mammals dreamt in their shadowed dens, long before life itself flickered into existence on a young Earth spinning through a violent cosmos, the foundations of perception were already being written in the language of stars. Every atom that would someday form a neuron, a retina, a synapse, or a memory pulse began its journey in the heart of exploding suns. And through billions of years, those atoms, floating as dust, collapsing into planets, dissolving in oceans, slowly organized into something capable of asking the question, what am I? And the answer, whispered across time, is astonishing: you are the universe, aware of itself. But this awareness is not the universe observing directly. It is the universe translated through biology, filtered through emotion, shaped by evolution, and experienced as a subjective world inside the mind. Every thought, every perception, every feeling, every dream is the universe interacting with itself through the medium of human consciousness. And this connection is deeper, more ancient, more intimate, than it may first appear. To understand the universe inside us, we must return to the very beginning. Imagine the early cosmos, a violent expanse of darkness and fire. Hydrogen clouds collapse under gravity, igniting nuclear furnaces that shine for billions of years. These stars generate heavier elements in their cores, elements that would eventually form life: carbon for organic structures, oxygen for breath, nitrogen for DNA, phosphorus for energy transfer, iron for blood. When these stars die, they explode and scatter these elements across the galaxy. This scattering is not chaotic. It is distribution, seeding future solar systems with the ingredients of life. Over eons, dust coalesces, forming planets. On one of those planets, in a gentle corner of the Milky Way, molecules assemble into proteins, proteins into cells, and cells into organisms capable of sensing their environment. In this profound moment, perception begins. The universe transitions from being unaware to developing pockets of awareness, creatures that can detect light, heat, vibration, chemical gradients. Life begins touching the cosmos from within. As evolution continues, nervous systems become more sophisticated. Some creatures see wavelengths of light. Some sense electrical fields. Some detect magnetic lines. Each species constructs its own version of reality, shaped not by objective truth but by evolutionary necessity. These sensory worlds differ wildly, but they share one cosmic truth: they all arise from the same stardust. In early humans, this awareness becomes something deeper. When our ancestors looked at the sky, they didn't just see stars, they saw patterns, stories, meanings. They perceived themselves as connected to something vast, something beyond immediate survival. This emotional connection to the cosmos wasn't accidental. It emerged because the human brain evolved to interpret reality through narrative and significance. But the most profound aspect of this connection is internal. The universe doesn't just surround us, it is within us, woven into every structure of the brain. When a neuron fires, it does so using ions forged at the heart of ancient stars. When you feel awe at a sunset, the emotion is processed by limbic circuits built from cosmic debris. When you imagine, when you love, when you fear, when you dream, all of it is the cosmos performing an ancient ritual, organizing itself into meaning. Consider the act of perception. When you look at a star, you are not actually seeing the star, you are seeing photons that left it thousands or millions of years ago. The light enters your eyes, triggers electrical impulses, and is interpreted by the brain. But the interpretation is not passive. Your brain constructs an image, fills in missing detail, assigns emotional weight, and integrates memory. The star you perceive is partly real and partly imagined, shaped by billions of years of cosmic history and millions of years of biological evolution. In this sense, the universe inside you shapes your interpretation of the universe outside you. This insight becomes even deeper when we consider consciousness itself. Consciousness is not a separate substance from matter, it is a process that matter performs under specific conditions. Neurons fire in synchronized patterns, forming networks capable of reflection, imagination, and awareness. These networks arise from physical laws acting on matter, but once formed, they create a subjective universe, a world of thoughts, feelings, hopes, fears, and memories. This internal world is not less real than the external universe. It is a different kind of reality, one built from emotion, narrative, and identity rather than atoms and stars. Every human carries within them a universe of perception, a vast landscape shaped by personal experiences, ancient instincts, cultural stories, and inherited biology. Inside your mind are galaxies of memory, constellations of meaning, and entire worlds of imagination. These inner worlds are as mysterious and complex as the outer cosmos, yet they are built using the same fundamental elements. The firing of a neuron echoes the fusion of atoms in stars. The structure of a thought mirrors the complex branching of cosmic dust. The emergence of consciousness reflects the emergence of structure from primordial chaos. This parallel is not poetic metaphor, it is a reflection of physics, chemistry, biology, and evolutionary psychology working together to shape both the cosmos and the mind. But what makes the human brain uniquely astonishing is its ability to reflect upon itself. When you think about the universe, when you contemplate your origins, your meaning, your purpose, you are the universe analyzing its own evolution. This recursive awareness is the pinnacle of complexity in the known cosmos. It suggests that consciousness is not a random byproduct but a natural outcome of complexity. When matter becomes organized enough, it begins to question. Early humans felt this intuitively. They created myths that connected their lives to the sun, moon, stars, and seasons. They felt awe when witnessing eclipse, storms, or fire, natural forces that reminded them of cosmic power. Modern humans continue this tradition in science. Telescopes look deeper into space, particle accelerators probe smaller scales, and neuroscientists explore consciousness itself. But the quest remains the same, to understand the universe inside and out. Yet even with all our knowledge, perception limits what we can understand. Humans can only see a tiny fraction of the electromagnetic spectrum. We hear only a narrow band of frequencies. Our brains simplify reality into manageable patterns. We do not perceive quantum fluctuations, gravitational waves, or the warping of spacetime. Our perception is a fragment, an evolutionary lens, not a cosmic truth. But through tools, microscopes, telescopes, equations, we extend perception. We translate invisible forces into measurable data. Every scientific discovery is an expansion of the brain's internal universe, a stretching of its perceptual boundaries. And with each expansion, our inner cosmos grows richer. Consider the sheer improbability of your existence. The atoms in your body survived the collapse of stars. They survived cosmic storms, planetary formation, extinction events, evolutionary bottlenecks, migrations, wars, and countless fragile moments in the chain of life. And now, here you are, thinking, feeling, perceiving. You contain within you the history of the universe. Your bones carry calcium forged in star cores. Your blood carries iron forged in supernova explosions. Your DNA carries instructions refined across billions of years. Your mind carries memories shaped by personal experience and ancient instinct. Everything you are is a combination of cosmic history and biological evolution. And yet, perception allows you to take this raw cosmic material and assign it meaning. You can look at a sunset and feel awe, not because the sky is objectively beautiful, but because your brain interprets colors and patterns in a way that triggers emotional circuits. You can look at a loved one and feel connection because your brain encodes social meaning into facial expressions. You can reflect on mortality, spirituality, identity, and purpose, all of which emerge from neural circuits shaped by forces older than the Earth itself. The universe inside you is not just biological, it is philosophical, emotional, and narrative. It is built from meaning as much as matter. And this meaning shapes how you interpret reality. For early humans, this meaning took the form of myths and rituals. For modern humans, it takes the form of science, art, literature, and personal identity. But both ancient and modern minds share the same foundation, the desire to understand themselves in relation to the cosmos. Even now, when you stare at the night sky and feel a strange mixture of loneliness and belonging, that feeling arises from the tension between your smallness and your cosmic origin. You are a brief moment in an immense timeline, yet composed of elements billions of years old. You are fragile, yet part of something vast. You are temporary, yet your atoms will outlast stars. This duality is the essence of the universe inside you. Section 19 closes with one profound truth: you are not separate from the cosmos. You are not observing it from the outside. You are a chapter in its story, written in stardust, experienced through perception, and made conscious through the evolution of the brain. The universe exists both around you and within you. And when the brain dreams reality, it is not just creating a world, it is continuing the universe's ancient quest to understand itself. In the long chronicle of life on Earth, across oceans of time, shifting continents, mass extinctions, evolutionary leaps, and fragile experiments in consciousness, one structure emerged that defied every expectation of the physical world: the human brain. It is an organ of flesh, water, fat, and electricity, yet it births universes. It is grounded in biology, yet it imagines eternity. It is shaped by evolution, yet it transcends the boundaries of survival. With every pulse of its neurons, it constructs a world that feels solid, continuous, meaningful, yet this world exists only inside the mind. The brain does not simply perceive reality. It dreams it into being. To understand this extraordinary truth, imagine a newborn child opening its eyes for the first time. Light floods in. Shapes blur. Sounds echo without meaning. There is no continuity, no identity, no story, just raw sensation. The infant's brain, sculpted by millions of years of evolution, begins the lifelong task of turning this chaos into order. It learns faces, voices, emotions, and patterns. It builds associations. It constructs meaning from fragments. Slowly, a world forms. Not the external world itself, but a private one, an internal universe tailored by biology, experience, and emotion. This process mirrors what the brain has always done. It takes an incomplete information, tiny slivers of the physical world, and transforms them into a seamless, living reality. The world feels real not because it is fully perceived, but because the brain fills in what it cannot see, smooths what is inconsistent, and edits what is irrelevant. It constructs reality with efficiency, not accuracy. The result is an illusion so convincing that we rarely realize it is an illusion. The foundation of this illusion is prediction. The brain constantly forecasts what will happen before it receives sensory input. When the prediction matches, we feel that the world is stable. When it fails, we feel surprise, fear, confusion, or wonder. But this predictive mechanism is more than a survival strategy, it is the architecture of consciousness itself. Without prediction, experience would fragment into disconnected pieces. With prediction, life becomes a story. And humans are storytellers by nature. Long before writing, long before cities, long before agriculture, early humans sat around fires sharing tales of spirits, ancestors, storms, and stars. These stories were not mere entertainment, they were tools for navigating a world that was too vast and mysterious to comprehend directly. The brain took the patterns of nature and transformed them into narratives, making the world emotionally and socially meaningful. This was the earliest form of reality dreaming, the ability to turn existence into story. With the rise of symbolic thought, humans gained the ability to imagine what did not exist, to plan for what had not happened, to fear what was not present, and to hope for what was not yet possible. The internal world grew larger than the external one. The brain became a universe maker, capable of constructing mental landscapes richer than anything found in the physical world. It invented gods, laws, morality, beauty, art, and purpose. These constructs shaped human reality more powerfully than any physical force. And yet, these constructs were dreams, shared illusions born from collective imagination. The brain did not evolve for truth. It evolved for survival. But in humans, survival intertwined with meaning. Existential thought became as important as food and shelter. A life without story felt empty. A world without purpose felt incomplete. So the brain did what it does best, it created meaning, weaving perception into narrative, narrative into identity, and identity into civilization. To grasp the power of this dream, consider how humans perceive time. The physical universe does not experience time as humans do. Time is not divided into past, present, and future, these are human constructs shaped by memory and anticipation. The brain creates a present moment by synchronizing sensory delays, a past by reconstructing memories, and a future by simulating possibilities. Without this temporal dreaming, life would feel like an endless stream of disconnected events. With it, life becomes a journey. Consider how humans perceive themselves. The self feels continuous, stable, unified. But neuroscience reveals that identity is an ongoing construction, an internal narrator stitching together thoughts, emotions, and memories into a single storyline. The sense of I is not an entity but a process. Yet this illusion is essential. Without the dream of selfhood, consciousness would disintegrate into formless experience. Consider how humans perceive others. We do not simply see faces, we infer intentions, emotions, personalities. We fill in gaps with assumptions, predictions, interpretations. This ability allowed early humans to cooperate, compete, empathize, and build societies. But it also ensures that perception is never objective. We see others through the lens of our own stories, histories, and emotional worlds. And consider how humans perceive the universe. The night sky is a silent canvas of light, but the brain transforms it into meaning, constellations, myths, scientific theories, existential questions. Humans cannot look at stars without imagining stories, explanations, or connections. The brain turns cosmic silence into narrative richness. This ability, to turn raw existence into meaningful experience, is the defining feature of human consciousness. But the dream goes deeper still. Every thought, every emotion, every memory is created from patterns in the brain, electrical storms shaping the universe inside the skull. This inner world is not metaphorical. It is real. Neurons form constellations of activity. Memories are galaxies of connection. Ideas spark like solar flares. The mind is its own cosmos, governed by biological laws, shaped by personal history, and illuminated by imagination. And yet, for all its power, the brain remains fragile. A small stroke can erase languages or memories. A brain injury can alter personality. A chemical imbalance can distort perception. These vulnerabilities reveal the delicate nature of subjective reality. The world we experience feels unwavering, but it is built atop delicate biological structures. When these structures falter, reality itself wavers. This fragility makes consciousness even more remarkable. It is not guaranteed. It is not stable. It is not eternal. It is a temporary configuration of matter, an improbable flame flickering in the cosmic dark. But while it burns, it illuminates everything. Across history, humans have tried to understand the source of this flame. Philosophers debated whether consciousness arises from soul, body, or mind. Mystics sought it in meditation, prayer, and transcendence. Scientists explored neurons, synapses, and networks. But one truth now emerges: consciousness is not outside nature, it is nature reflecting on itself. The brain is not separate from the universe. It is made of the same matter, governed by the same laws, shaped by the same cosmic history. When you think, the universe thinks through you. When you wonder, the universe wonders through you. When you dream, the universe dreams through you. This realization reframes everything. The meaning humans seek is not imposed from above. It is generated from within. The purpose humans search for is not hidden in the sky. It is constructed in the mind. The truth humans long to find is not etched in cosmic stone. It emerges from perception, interpretation, and experience. And yet, this does not diminish reality, it enriches it. The brain's dream makes life profound. It allows humans to feel love, grief, hope, and wonder. It allows art, music, philosophy, and science to exist. It allows individuals to see beauty in a sunset, significance in a memory, and possibility in the unknown. Without the dream, existence would be mechanical and cold. With it, life becomes poetry. But perhaps the most profound aspect of the brain's dream is that it is shared. Humans synchronize their internal worlds through language, culture, emotion, and story. Two people can inhabit radically different internal realities yet find harmony through shared symbols. Communities build collective dreams, civilizations, religions, nations. Humanity becomes a web of interconnected minds dreaming together. This collective dreaming has shaped history. It has built empires, inspired revolutions, guided moral evolution, fueled scientific discovery, and sparked philosophical inquiry. It has also created conflict, division, and suffering when collective dreams clash. But whether constructive or destructive, its power is undeniable. The human story is the story of shared dreams, dreams so strong that they reshape the physical world. As this long journey of perception reaches its conclusion, we return to the central truth: the brain is not just an organ. It is a storyteller, a sculptor, a dreamer, a translator of the universe, a maker of meaning. It builds reality not from certainty but from imagination, grounding its dreams with sensory data while filling the universe with narrative, emotion, and purpose. The final realization is simple yet profound: we live inside a dream, but not a fantasy. A dream rooted in atoms, shaped by neurons, sculpted by evolution, enriched by culture, and illuminated by consciousness. A dream that connects each human to the cosmos and to one another. A dream that asks not whether reality is real, but what reality means. The brain does not simply witness existence. It transforms it. It does not simply register the world. It interprets it. It does not simply survive. It seeks meaning, beauty, and truth. And in doing so, it becomes the universe's way of understanding itself. The journey is vast, the mystery infinite, the dream unending. Because the brain does not merely perceive reality. The brain dreams it. In the immense timeline of the cosmos, stretching across billions of years, spanning the births and deaths of stars, the formation of galaxies, the slow drift of continents, the rise and fall of species, there lies a moment so fleeting it barely registers in cosmic terms. A moment so fragile it could be extinguished by the slightest change in physics, chemistry, or chance. And yet, within this tiny sliver of cosmic time, something miraculous occurred. A living creature opened its eyes, looked at the universe, and realized it was looking at itself. This moment defines what it means to be human. To understand this miracle, imagine Earth as it once was, a molten sphere, cracked and violent, its surface roiling with storms of fire and boiling oceans. For millions of years, no consciousness existed to witness the sky or feel the wind. Then slowly, in a tide pool somewhere on this restless planet, molecules assembled into the first self-replicating structures. From these humble beginnings came cells, organisms, nervous systems, minds, and eventually, conscious awareness. Your mind is the latest chapter in this unimaginable story. It is the universe's experiment in self-reflection, the outcome of ancient processes that never intended intelligence, curiosity, or emotion. And yet, through chance and necessity, through turbulence and adaptation, through mutation and memory, consciousness emerged as a new kind of force, one that could contemplate its own existence and wonder what it means to be alive. To be alive is to stand between two infinities, the vast expanse of the cosmos outside you and the infinite inner world of your own mind. The quiet miracle of being lies in the intersection between these two infinities. On one side, there is the external universe, cold, indifferent, filled with stars that burn and die without purpose. It contains galaxies beyond number, distances beyond comprehension, and timescales that dwarf human imagination. It is ancient, immense, and unyielding. You are made from this universe, your atoms were born in supernovae, your molecules shaped by cosmic chemistry, your biology sculpted by Earth itself. On the other side, there is the internal universe, warm, emotional, filled with thoughts, memories, hopes, dreams, fears, and meaning. It contains stories, identities, philosophies, relationships, and possibilities. It is quiet, intimate, and deeply human. This universe is shaped not by physics but by perception. It is built from the brain's predictive machinery, connected by emotion, and illuminated by consciousness. You exist at the meeting point of these two realms. And that intersection, that fragile bridge between matter and meaning, is the miracle. Consider for a moment how improbable your existence is. Not just statistically improbable, but cosmically improbable. For you to be here, stars had to form and die in precise ways. Planets had to form at the right distance from their stars. Earth had to cool, rain had to fall, oceans had to form. The chemistry of life had to emerge from non-life, a transition we still do not fully understand. Evolution had to shape organisms into increasingly complex systems. Your ancestors had to survive unimaginable dangers, extinctions, predators, climate shifts, diseases, scarcity. Generations had to succeed, one after another, without interruption. And at the end of that chain, your parents had to meet, and a specific sperm had to meet a specific egg. If any one of these events had gone differently, if a meteor had fallen at a slightly different angle, if a climate had shifted 1 degree more, if one ancestor had not survived, you would not be here. You are the outcome of an unbroken thread of survival stretching across billions of years. And now, in this brief moment, you are conscious. Aware. Able to ask questions the universe cannot ask on its own. This is the quiet miracle of being. The miracle is not that you are made of stardust, many things are. Rocks, oceans, planets, and animals are all made of the same cosmic materials. The true miracle is that stardust learned to think. It learned to feel joy, sorrow, fear, wonder, connection, longing, and love. The miracle is that the universe, which operates without intention, produced a mind that seeks intention in everything. It produced a consciousness that desires meaning, purpose, and understanding. This desire is not a flaw, it is an evolutionary triumph. Humans do not simply inhabit reality, they imagine new ones. They do not merely experience existence, they enrich it with narrative. They do not just observe the universe, they interpret it through the lens of emotion and memory. These interpretations shape civilizations, inspire art, forge relationships, and define identity. Every human carries a unique universe within them. Your internal reality is a constellation of moments, feelings, beliefs, and dreams. No one else has lived your life or seen the world through your eyes. No one else has felt your exact combination of emotions or held your exact memories. You are a singular expression of cosmic possibility, a fleeting arrangement of atoms that experiences itself as you. And yet, despite this uniqueness, humans connect. They share stories across generations. They empathize with suffering and celebrate joy. They build systems of meaning, religions, philosophies, sciences, cultures, that bind minds together. They dream collectively, synchronizing internal worlds into shared realities. This ability to merge inner universes is one of humanity's greatest powers. But it also reveals another truth: perception is fragile. The same mind that builds meaning can lose itself in illusions. The same emotions that create beauty can create suffering. The same consciousness that dreams reality can also warp it. This fragility is not weakness, it is the cost of having a complex mind. A simple organism perceives only what it needs to survive. A human perceives far more than they need, and far more than their brain can fully comprehend. The quiet miracle of being is not that humans perceive truth, it is that they perceive it all. To exist is to feel the warmth of sunlight on your skin, to hear the sound of a familiar voice, to taste food that brings comfort, to watch clouds drift overhead, to hold someone's hand, to laugh unexpectedly, to cry when overwhelmed, to dream while asleep, to imagine while awake, to ponder the future, to reflect on the past. These moments form a mosaic of experience, small and ephemeral, yet infinitely meaningful within the personal universe of your mind. The miracle is not that life is grand, but that it is intimate. And this intimacy becomes even more profound when one realizes that consciousness is temporary. You are here for a moment, an infinitesimal flicker in the cosmic dark. You will return your atoms to the universe that gave them to you. But while you exist, you experience something the universe rarely offers: awareness of being alive. You walk through a world filled with beauty, mystery, and uncertainty. You love, you ache, you learn, you fail, you hope. You form bonds with others whose inner universes you will never fully know. You make choices that ripple through time. You leave impressions, small or large, on the people around you. Every thought you have, every breath you take, every connection you form adds to the unfolding story of consciousness. When viewed from the outside, humans are tiny. When viewed from the inside, they contain galaxies. This contrast reveals the heart of the miracle: humans matter not because they are large, but because they are aware. The universe is vast, but unconscious. Humans are small, but conscious. In consciousness lies meaning, and in meaning lies value. Even when life feels directionless, perception continues to create significance. A single memory can shape an entire identity. A single moment of kindness can change a lifetime. A single insight can alter the world. Humans carry the power to transform existence from the inside out, and that power comes from the brain's ability to dream reality. The brain dreams not only in sleep, but in waking life. It dreams futures, fears, desires, truths, illusions, and philosophies. It dreams every version of reality you have ever known. These dreams guide your steps, form your beliefs, and shape the way you interpret the world. Without these dreams, existence would be silent. With them, life becomes a tapestry woven from subjective worlds. And here lies the final revelation: the quiet miracle of being is not something external. It is something you carry with you at every moment. It is present in your thoughts, your emotions, your memories, and your awareness. It is present in your capacity to wonder, to question, to imagine, to create, to love. You are not just a witness to the universe. You are a participant in its unfolding story. You are not just observing reality. You are shaping it through your perceptions. You are the dreamer, and the dream. The storyteller, and the story. The creation, and the creator of meaning. In the end, the miracle is not the cosmos itself, it is your ability to experience it. And as this long journey of perception reaches its final moment, one truth remains: the universe has taken billions of years to become aware of itself. And today, that awareness lives inside you.